The Mute at Hogwarts. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction. So don't try any techniques you hear here in real life, your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 76 Farewell Gift. But when I returned to the chessboard, I found Snape already there, Hermione continued. Ron, standing beside him, also had an embarrassed expression on his face. God knows how frightened he must have been when he woke up and saw Snape's sallow face. He almost thought Hermione and Harry had been killed, and that he would soon ascend to heaven, ending his short life. But Snape simply looked at him with disdain until Hermione returned. Later, we learned that the person who had been working for who was Professor Quirrell, and that we had wrongly accused Snape. Then Professor Dumbledore came out holding Harry and told us that Professor Quirrell was dead and that Harry had protected the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione added. She looked at Jean, a little embarrassed, but cleared her throat and said to Jean, Jean, I'm sorry, we didn't believe you before. You were right. Snape was indeed protecting Harry, and Quirrell was the bad guy. Hermione blushed slightly, apologizing for her misunderstanding and distrust of Jean. Me too, Joan, you're right. We've all been fooled by Quirrell, Ron said. It's nothing. I just think that if Professor Snape had been at the school for so many years and was truly a bad guy, the other professors and Dumbledore would have figured it out before us, said Joan. And Quirrell's disguise was so good. Even Dumbledore didn't suspect him before, let alone you. Yes, he was so good at it. I used to feel sorry for him, Ron nodded vigorously, agreeing wholeheartedly. Hermione glanced at Ron and said nothing. Instead, she opened the book in her hand and flipped to a certain page. There's definitely something wrong with Quirrell's situation, but it's a pity we've ignored it until now. In fact, according to the description in this book, Dark Arts and Magic, Quirrell's sudden change in temperament clearly shows that he's embraced the dark arts. She handed the book to Joan. As for Ron, Hermione knew him well. He would rather play another game of wizard chess and get beaten up than read such a thick book. Guan Qiong read the book's introduction and understood that Hermione wanted to discuss Quirrell and Voldemort with him. He nodded. Hagrid said Quirrell was a completely different person back then. Back then, he was incredibly confident and capable. Later, he even went out to gain practical experience for his theories. That makes sense. He must have met who while he was out there and was bewitched by him. He then possessed him, allowing him to hide from Dumbledore and the others, Hermione said. She had overheard 2 sentences from Dumbledore and Snape's conversation last night, including surprisingly, the spirit form is alive and I didn't find it possessing Quirrell. That was why she had skipped a morning's rest and gone straight to the library. She didn't expect a comfortable summer vacation until she got to the bottom of this. This had been a year's worth of research, and if she couldn't finally figure it all out, she wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully at night. Wait, Ron suddenly called out, looking at the two of them. Hearing you say that, I feel a pity for Quirrell, too. He's not a good man being coerced, is he? Besides, we saw Snape hex Harry's broomstick with our own eyes. It was probably Quirrell who cast the hex. He was there that day, Hermione reacted quickly. As for Snape, she hesitated, but continued, he was probably protecting Harry. That's probably the case. Snape protecting Harry? That's too hard to believe. I think he'd like to stuff Harry's head into a cauldron to make potions, Ron said in disbelief. But it was the only possibility, and he couldn't bear to believe it. That's probably the truth. Hermione snapped the book shut and breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a sense of relief all over her body. Everything was cleared up and resolved, and the Philosopher's Stone hadn't fallen into the wrong hands. This year had truly been a wonderful year. Well, I wonder when Harry will wake up. I really want to see his face when he hears the news, Ron said from the side. Harry woke up on the 3rd day. By the time he awoke, Ron had already been discharged, enjoying the adulation. The secret of their protection of the Philosopher's Stone had inadvertently leaked, and now the entire school considered them heroes. Hermione quietly began preparing to go home, returning some books and materials while catching up on her summer homework. She also had to attend classes to keep up with her peers, so she couldn't bring any magical materials home. Furthermore, there were rules prohibiting young wizards from practicing magic outside of school, or they would be punished by the Ministry of Magic, with severe consequences including breaking their wands and revoking their study materials. Meanwhile, Guan Qiong had received a message from Dumbledore, asking him to visit Quirrell's former office, apparently with something for him. Confused, he went to Quirrell's office anyway. He opened the door to a bare room. Aside from the standard desk and chair, everything related to Quirrell had been cleared out by the school staff. They were searching for information related to Voldemort and also trying to prevent the possible curses contained within these items. Even the air was cleared, leaving not a trace of garlic. Of course, one item remained. A silver bracelet with mysterious patterns on it. It was made of an unknown material, though it felt slightly cool to the touch. Stringed to the bracelet was a cross-shaped pendant, made of the same unique material, resembling meteorite, and quite heavy. Next to the bracelet was a piece of parchment with handwriting on it. Guan Qiong unfolded the parchment, revealing a letter from Quirrell. It said Quirrell loved his Christmas gift and that he was the only one to give Quirrell a gift this Christmas, which delighted him. He had found the bracelet in Africa, a valuable magical tool, and he gave it to Guan Qiong, hoping she would enjoy it. Of course, if anything happened to him, he hoped Guan Qiong would avenge him. He had a bad feeling he'd been cursed by the Defense Against the Dark Arts class and wouldn't live long. Guan Qiong stared at the bracelet in amazement, turning on his magical perspective. He believed it was safe since it had passed through Dumbledore's hands, but it would still be a good idea to take a look. Chapter 77, Incomplete Loyalty, Totally Disloyal. The magic circuits on the bracelet didn't reveal much. Guan Qiong guessed they were for strength and adaptability, perhaps due to the size of the wrist. The cross pendant, however, was different. Guan Qiong saw two layers of magic circuits, one inside and one outside. The inner layer was sharp and tough, while the outer layer, like a ball, enveloped the inner layer. It seemed there was no danger. Guan Qiong thought to himself as he picked up the bracelet. Holding the pendant in his hand, Guan Qiong considered it and tried to inject magic into it. The cross began to deform under Guan Qiong's magic. As he poured more and more magic into it, its size grew larger and its overall length became slender. The previously rounded part now became sharp, gleaming with a cold light. It had unexpectedly transformed into a knight's longsword. If Guan Qiong hadn't been eating rock biscuits to strengthen his body, he wouldn't have been able to hold it steady in such a sudden change. Guan Qiong examined the longsword in his hand. It was very simple, showing its age, yet still sharp. It was unadorned, save for a few ornate patterns along the blade, lending it a touch of mystery. He tried swinging it a few times, feeling quite comfortable with it. However, he wasn't a warrior after all, and didn't have any swordsmanship skills to match. Meanwhile, from his magical perspective, the sword's magic circuits had transformed into a sharp outer layer and a rounded inner layer. With two layers of magic circuits, after injecting magic into the transformation, would it no longer require additional injections? Guan Qiong pondered the effects of these two layers. Apparently, the transformation was permanent, requiring no constant injections of magic, which made things much easier. As Guan Qiong injected more magic, the longsword began to shrink, quickly transforming into a cross pendant. The silver bracelet also appeared, automatically binding itself to his wrist. Quite convenient. It was a nice item. Guan Qiong smiled and let it bind around his left wrist. As for the contents of the parchment, "Is Professor Quirrell a good man?" Harry asked Dumbledore in confusion. "Why do you ask?" Dumbledore asked back, his eyes gentle. Professor Quirrell was possessed by Voldemort. All of these things were done by Voldemort. And Professor Quirrell clearly had the opportunity to kill me before, but he didn't use his wand, just his hands, Harry said. "Is that so? So you think he was controlled by Voldemort, but in reality, he was a good man who was controlled by coercion," Dumbledore said. "Yes, before he died, he told me to avenge him," Harry said seriously. "My child, before I explain Quirrell's affairs, I need to tell you something." Dumbledore's expression was gentle and kind, and he spoke in the tone of a teacher. "In this world, it is difficult to distinguish between good and bad people. Perhaps it is true that there are very few people who are purely good or purely bad." Harry looked puzzled. "Most of the time, it's difficult for a person to determine whether he is a good person or a bad person. Maybe he does good things today and bad things tomorrow. Maybe he did good things when he was a child and did bad things when he grew up. Such people are very common. It can even be said that most ordinary people are wandering between the two. What about Professor Quirrell? The same is true for him. At the beginning, he was a good student with excellent grades and rich theoretical knowledge, Dumbledore explained. He later went to Albania. There's reason to believe he went there on his own initiative. From what I understand, practical research into the theory of the dark arts doesn't require going there. He went to find Voldemort, perhaps to gain a deeper understanding of the dark arts, or perhaps because he felt he could control Voldemort. Regardless, he was ultimately controlled by Voldemort, and it gave Voldemort a moment's respite. But after coming into contact with Voldemort, he realized he was wrong. Voldemort was too powerful and constantly devouring his life. Perhaps for the sake of the wizarding world, or perhaps simply to save himself, he couldn't allow Voldemort to remain within him. So, he contacted you, but he quickly realized it wasn't working. He then brought in the troll, whose weak spot was at the back of its head, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He then tried to remind Gwen in class so she could remind me, but apparently Gwen had overlooked that aspect as well, Dumbledore said regretfully. Why didn't he come directly to you? Harry asked. Child, you know too little about the dark arts. Voldemort possessed him. If he had revealed the truth to me, Voldemort, sensing his malice, would have instantly awakened, and he would have surely died, Dumbledore explained. No one wants to die, so he could only use this method as a subtle reminder, but unfortunately, none of us understood. Later, Voldemort began to consume more and more of his life force. He had no choice but to fight tooth and nail to obtain the Philosopher's Stone and use the elixir to save his life, but in the end, Harry said. I was there, child. Dumbledore looked at Harry with his deep blue eyes. Voldemort is only a fragmented soul, but Quirrell is a complete wizard. He could sense my gaze, so he didn't dare use his wand to attack you. After discovering that the love magic within you could harm Voldemort, he could only try to use your magic to expel Voldemort and save his own life, but unfortunately, he failed. Voldemort and he had become one, their very essences. The love magic not only expelled Voldemort, but also killed him. As for Quirrell's final question about you avenging him, I'm sure you can figure it out. Dumbledore looked at Harry encouragingly. You mean, knowing he was doomed, he hoped to drag Voldemort, the one who caused all this, with him? Harry thought for a moment, then spoke slowly. That makes sense, doesn't it? Anyone would do that, Dumbledore said approvingly. So, Professor Quirrell did all this to stay alive, Harry concluded. Yes, but he's not a good man. To you, he's the bad guy. What he did to you wasn't fake. He really wanted to kill you because killing you would make Voldemort let him go, Dumbledore added. So that's how it is. Harry felt a little dizzy. He felt like he understood, but also felt like he didn't. You'll understand these things when you grow up. Get some rest. This year's affairs are over, and there's a party waiting for you tonight. Dumbledore left, leaving Harry alone in bed, thinking. Chapter 78 Ending. Guan Qiong set the parchment ablaze with a flaming charm and watched it slowly soar into the air. While the words seemed heartfelt, and he had indeed been given something, he, familiar with the plot of the first Philosopher's Stone and possessing the soul and values of an adult, would not be easily fooled. Apart from anything else, the malice he had sensed from Quirrell several times before was genuine. Quirrell had definitely considered doing something malicious to him, but he hadn't done it in the end, perhaps drawn to Harry. Come to think of it, with such a gifted body, Quirrell might have even bewitched Voldemort. He trusted a person's nature so deeply that, to survive, he would have sold his students. Even if he had been asked to sell his own child, he would have done so immediately. He had witnessed many such evil deeds in his past life. Although, in this life, his hormones sometimes made him act like a child, the essence of his soul and his knowledge remained unchanged. Quirrell's words had no effect on him. Guan Qiong looked at the bracelet on his left hand and smiled. After all, getting a good magic item for free was still good. Guan Qiong flicked his left hand lightly, and magic power surged out. In an instant, an ancient longsword appeared on his left hand, pointing diagonally at the ground, with a chilling aura and an intimidating edge. He twisted his wrist casually, waving the longsword a few times, and then magic power surged out, and the longsword returned, turning into a bracelet on his hand. Cool. Guan Qiong gave himself a thumbs up in his heart, and walked outside in a good mood. At the same time, he also gave this magic prop a name. Nodung. This is the name of Siegfried's sword in the Ring of the Nibelung, which means come to me when I need it, appearing in my hand when I need it can be simply translated as liberator. When Guan Qiong saw the name of this sword when he was reading a book on the history of magic before, he thought it was very cool. He didn't expect to get it today. It must be said that it was a pleasant surprise. The end of the first school year was really perfect. In the evening, the year-end banquet for the whole school began. The great hall was adorned with green and silver sashes, draped throughout. A large banner depicting the Slytherin snake hung on the wall behind the head table. Harry, with Madame Pomfrey's permission, descended the stairs and entered the great hall. Everyone stared at him in amazement, as if thinking, the savior is truly the savior. Even back in school, he was no ordinary man, protecting the Philosopher's Stone and even defeating a professor. Of course, they only knew they had defeated the professor who had attempted to steal the stone. As for the professor's possessions, Dumbledore had ordered the trio to keep them secret for the sake of security. Harry made his way to the Gryffindor table and sat between Ron and Hermione. Next to Hermione sat Gwen, and next to Ron were the Weasley twins. A moment later, Dumbledore arrived, and the great hall grew quiet. Another year has passed, Dumbledore said happily. Before you enjoy these delicious dishes, I hope you will listen to the clichés of an old man like me. This year has been wonderful. I believe you have learned a lot, both from your friends and professors. Hermione looked at Guan Qiong, who was also looking at her. Thank you, Hermione said softly. Me too, Guan Qiong flashed a light. School life with little Hermione around made him feel much younger. Of course, this meant his mentality. Summer vacation is coming up soon. I hope you'll relax and not dwell too much on school. Enjoy your summer vacation and clear your minds for the next academic year. Of course, first we have to hold the House Cup Awards ceremony. The scores for each house are as follows. 4th place, Hufflepuff, 352 points. 3rd place, Larklaw, 426 points. 2nd place, Gryffindor, 442 points. 1st place, Slytherin, 475 points. Harry missed the Quidditch match due to his coma, and Gryffindor lost a crucial 50 points. Slytherin, on the other hand, had been saddled with Snape's bonus points, leaving the narrow lead they had previously held thanks to Guan Qiong at 30 points. Thunderous cheers and stamping of feet erupted from the Slytherin table. Harry, Ron, and Neville felt nauseous and uncomfortable as Malfoy banged his goblet against the table. But then, Dumbledore's words stirred their spirits. Of course, at the last minute, I still have some points to distribute, which have been accumulated over the past few days, Dumbledore said. Mr. Ron Weasley, for winning a most brilliant game of chess, I shall award Gryffindor House 20 points. Miss Hermione Gryffindor, for calmly reasoning with logic in the face of a raging fire, I shall award Gryffindor 20 points. Harry Potter, for displaying unparalleled courage and exceptional bravery in protecting the Philosopher's Stone, I shall award Gryffindor House 30 points. The cheers from Gryffindor were deafening. Guan Qiong, watching Harry and his companions, held in awe by the crowd, wondered if these bonuses weren't actually Gryffindor House points. They were clearly bonuses to Harry and his companions' reputation. Of course, Guan Qiong's presence made these bonuses less outrageous. If the original book had added 50 points, some would have considered Dumbledore abusing his power, but now it seemed much more reasonable. After all, only 30 points for protecting the Philosopher's Stone was a rather modest bonus. So, we need to make some small changes here. Dumbledore clapped his hands, and the green draping ribbons turned bright red, silver turned gold, the giant Slytherin snake vanished, and a majestic Gryffindor lion appeared. Gryffindor had won the House Cup. The dinner began with cheers from Gryffindor that nearly shook the roof off the ground, and as time passed, Guan Qiong's first year also came to an end. The departure seemed instantaneous. The wardrobe was suddenly empty, and the items were put into suitcases. Notices were handed to each student, warning them not to use magic during the holidays, just like the warnings against swimming during the holidays in Muggle schools. Guan Qiong began to say goodbye to them one by one. He had other plans and would not be taking the Hogwarts Express today. Hermione hugged him and asked him to send her a letter once he decided where to stay for the summer vacation so that they could communicate through letters. Guan Qiong nodded in agreement. Harry and Ron seemed to have something to say before leaving, but ultimately kept their mouths shut. Guan Qiong guessed they wanted him to send them a copy of the answers to their homework during the summer break, but with Hermione constantly beside him, they didn't dare speak. Watching the students leave one after another and the train pull away, Guan Qiong stretched and turned to leave. Summer break might be interesting, but of course, it might also be boring. End of Volume 1. Chapter 79 Guan Qiong's Summer Vacation. Oriental boy, give me a grilled bacon and a gin and gin. I'll have a Burlando. Flash, I'll have a Langreet, 2 gin and gin. The once stingy atmosphere of the leaky cauldron was spruced up. The tables and floors were clear of old grease and unidentified objects. 3 magical lights hung from the walls, illuminating the bar. Guests gathered in a group, making requests one after another, but no one responded. They sat idly by, their gazes fixed on the bar. There stood a handsome young man, perhaps 14 or 15, with black hair and eyes. He was clearly from the east. Hearing the guests' requests, the young man smiled politely, extended his right hand, and snapped his fingers. Sherry, brandy, and other liquors flew out from the side, hovering in midair, along with lemon, ice, orange juice, mint, and other ingredients. With the young man's finger movements, like playing a piano, drinks flew from the bottles. Under his control, they were mixed in the desired proportions before landing in the glasses below. After adding the other ingredients as requested, the young man gently rubbed them with his left hand, and from under the bar, some more special ingredients flew. Dark yellow leaves, white skins interspersed with blueberries and crimson vine roots. As they flew, the leaves were burned to ash by the sudden flames, the berries were squeezed to release their blue juice, and the vine roots were cut open to remove their cores, which were then processed with flames and ice to form small red balls. The 3 special ingredients were placed in different glasses, and the 3 cocktails were completed. They then floated towards the guests' tables, the process smooth and perfect. Perfect. The guests began to enjoy their drinks, and the young man took a break. With a flick of his finger, a nearby book floated in front of him, opening to the place he had been reading last time. What a relief. Guan Qiong stretched happily and began to read. It was the beginning of August, and he had been working as a waiter and bartender at the Leaky Cauldron for a month. Taking a sip of the gin he left for him, Guan Qiong felt the magic within him surge under the stimulation, and joyfully turned the pages of his book. Working at the Leaky Cauldron had always been part of his plan. He'd been planning it for a long time. As for the reason, it wasn't anything else but simply money. That's right, money. As an orphan, he had no parental support. While Dumbledore's help at school meant he didn't have to worry about tuition, and the income from the Forbidden Forest allowed him to live comfortably while at school without having to strain too much. But he ultimately had to think about the future. Even the second-year textbooks and Lockhart's set alone were expensive. Buying them all would wipe out all the money he'd saved from his first year. Not to mention holidays, birthdays, or anything else he wanted to buy, all that would cost money. For a time traveler like him, being short of money was truly humiliating. After half a year of contemplation, he finally decided on a way to earn money during the summer vacation. Wine. The British love to drink, and so do British wizards. If he could tap into this, he could certainly live comfortably, even if he didn't become a millionaire. So he came here and became a bartender. Another gingery, Flash boy, a customer called out to Guan Qiong after finishing his drink. Guan Qiong looked up and snapped his fingers. Under his levitation spell, the drink and other ingredients blended together, transforming into a golden cocktail with a hint of pale blue, which flew towards the customer. Guan Qiong's eyes shone brightly, as he looked at each soul drink as if it were galleons. As a bartender, he earned a commission. The story of how he got here is long, but to put it simply, he contacted Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, through Hannah Abbott, bringing him a cocktail with a special effect. After a week of internship, he officially became a bartender there. He also signed a profit-sharing contract with Tom, the owner, in the form of a magical contract. Since they were from the same class, asking for an introduction wasn't out of place. Guan Qiong also gave her some small oriental gifts. Seeing the cocktails attracting a much larger crowd than usual, the owner, Tom, accepted Guan Qiong's offer of cooperation, though this was partly due to his granddaughter Hannah's affection. After the contract was signed, Hannah was taken away by her mother. Owner Tom, however, felt dejected for a while, wishing he could continue to work with Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong then became a bartender and settled down at the Leaky Cauldron. Life at the bar was interesting but monotonous. People were initially curious about him, but after a while, they grew accustomed to him. They called him the Oriental Kid, without any ill intention, simply because nicknames were easier to remember in this area than their given names. After he used flash grenades, illumination spells, and fists to drive off troublemakers. Some people began calling him the Flash Kid, a more friendly way of addressing him, sometimes even considering buying him a drink. Of course, there were some malicious people who called him dumb brat or damned Oriental. Guan Qiong had no way of dealing with them. After all, the customer was king. At most, he'd accidentally add a few extra ingredients to a cocktail. And when they were causing trouble, he'd throw a flashbang and a fist. Even after being strengthened with rock biscuits, his fists still hurt, especially since the wizards were also weak and inactive. As for the rest, there was nothing much to say. The 2 galleons of weak bartender's salary, plus a 2 galleon share of the drinks, kept Guan Qiong's wallet sluggish, allowing him to spend a lot. Of course, he also brought in a lot of money for the bar. At least, sales had more than tripled. In terms of profit, owner Tom had practically doubled his previous earnings without even having to do anything. It was a win-win situation. Guan Qiong pricked his ears and could faintly hear snoring from upstairs. It was owner Tom's voice. Ever since Guan Qiong arrived, he'd handed over everything to her, including purchasing, collecting payments, and any other financial matters, without even a second thought. Trust was the key. Guan Qiong shook her head and continued reading. Chapter 80, How to Avoid Tracking Threads. Guan Qiong yawned tiredly as he watched the last customer leave. Working at the bar was fine, but it was the time that made Guan Qiong, a morning person, a little uncomfortable. After all, he was still growing. He looked at the wall clock and saw it was already 3 in the morning. However, after mentally calculating today's sales and his share of the profits, Guan Qiong decided to endure it. He couldn't just give up his health for the sake of his salary. Besides, it would be alright soon. Soon, he'd be able to live a life of just lying down and collecting money. Guan Qiong patted the bar counter, thinking to himself. Cleaning up the bar was easy. A combination of levitation charm, descaling charm, water cleansing charm, and flame charm, and in just a few strokes, the entire bar looked like new. Then, with a snap of his fingers, the bar door closed, and the magic bulbs went out, leaving only a bright spot of light in front of him. A beautiful wooden staircase led Guan Qiong to the second-floor guest rooms. There had been few guests recently, and they would likely only start to see some visitors around the time Hogwarts started. Arriving at his room, Guan Qiong opened the door and entered. The room wasn't very large, consisting of a bed and a table, both made of oak and looking quite old. Outside the window, London's Borough Market and the Tower of Southwark Cathedral were visible, though not clearly visible in the darkness. There was also a fireplace, though it wasn't used at this time of year. Guan Qiong went to the table and pulled out several unopened letters from his coat, opening them one by one. These were letters he had received during the day, from Hermione and Ron. He was about to write his replies and mail them tomorrow. Ron's handwriting was flamboyant, explaining that he had successfully visited Harry's house and rescued him. The letter also explained the reason for the month-long silence. A house elf named Dobby had intercepted all the letters. Finally, he extended an invitation to Guan Qiong, hoping she could stay with him for a while. Mrs. Weasley and Mr. Weasley were eager to meet him. Guan Qiong's right fingers danced lightly, and a quill flew into his hand, while a piece of letter floated before him. He first felt sympathy for Harry's plight and then expressed joy at his escape from the Dursleys. He then declined the invitation, saying he was still busy with some things. He hoped they could get together when the school year started and they came to Diagon Alley to buy things. He also wanted to meet Mr. Weasley. Guan Qiong wrote quickly, finishing a reply without much thought. Looking at the neat handwriting, Guan Qiong let it float to the side, waiting for the ink to dry. Next came Hermione's letter. Dear Guan Qiong, I'm glad to hear that you're having a good time at the Leaky Cauldron, but I must remind you that underage drinking is not allowed, whether in human society or the wizarding world. My summer vacation was a bit awful. I had to change some of my habits. For example, when the barbecue on my plate ran out, I should go to the kitchen to get another piece instead of waiting for it to appear. I didn't need to keep my eyes on the stairs when I walked up, it wouldn't disappear. This made me feel a bit like a freak. Honestly, not being able to use magic did cause some problems. I bought some magic books, but I couldn't practice them. And I was afraid I'd forget the spells I learned in first year if I didn't use them. I'm wondering how you've solved the problem of not being able to use magic during the summer vacation. If you have a good solution, please let me know. Also, Harry seems to have had some problems, but Ron has already rescued him. I really hope they haven't done anything illegal. Please reply as soon as possible, my friend, Hermione. Guan Qiong chuckled as he looked at Hermione's letter, observing the letters floating around him and the bright light in the air. Higher up, on a protruding shelf on the wall, lay Guan Qiong's wand. 13.5 inches long, made of jacaranda wood and unicorn hair. He hadn't touched it in a month, and wondered if it felt Guan Qiong had neglected it. After a moment's thought, Guan Qiong picked up his quill and wrote back to Hermione. Dear Hermione, regarding spellcasting, as far as I understand, Trace's judgment of spellcasting is based on two factors. One is the contract within the wand. If an underage wizard's wand is used to cast magic during the holidays, the Ministry of Magic will detect it and issue a warning. If you can cast spells wandless or borrow the wand of another adult wizard, you can avoid this detection. Secondly, there's the issue of magical detection in the area where the young wizard resides. This is very troublesome for you, as you live in Muggle society. You might be the only wizard in a large area around you, so any magic will be attributed to you. I don't have a good solution for this. My only suggestion is to find a place with many wizards to stay during your holidays to confuse the area's magical detection. If you don't mind, there are quite a few vacancies in the Leaky Cauldron. I have a good relationship with the owner, so you could stay there for a while and practice magic. Your friend, Guan Qiong. After placing the two letters in the envelope, Guan Qiong let out a long sigh. The Trace's detection mechanism was just his guess, but it was probably accurate. It's actually easy to infer that the ban on underage wizards casting spells is essentially intended to prevent young wizards from revealing the existence of the magical world to Muggles. The wand contract detection prevents young wizards from actively casting spells with their wands, while the area detection prevents them from accidentally causing magical disturbances. By the time they reach adulthood at 17, wizards have fully mastered their magical powers, matured mentally, and become more knowledgeable about the law. They won't act impulsively, and thus no longer need these restrictions. Obviously, these restrictions are easily circumvented. As long as a young wizard lives in a wizarding family and is surrounded by other wizards, he can borrow another wizard's wand to practice magic. These young wizards are clearly not the primary target of the Trace's restrictions. They pose no risk of exposing their magic to human society, and they are supervised by adult wizards, so they won't run into any major problems. The Trace's main target is young wizards who live in human society and perhaps have Muggle parents. For example, Harry and Hermione. As for Guan Qiong, after a month of practice, he's already on the verge of performing spells silently and without a wand. At least, with the exception of the unstable fire charm, all the spells he learned in first year can be cast silently and without a wand. This allows him to avoid the Trace and practice magic during the summer vacation. Chapter 81 Magic in Fiction. When Guan Qiong awoke, the sun outside had already reached its zenith. A fiery breath lingered through the window, filling the room and making him feel a bit stuffy. After a long stretch, Guan Qiong got up, washed up, and thought about what he needed to do today. Business at the bar wasn't always good, nor did he always need to work. Today, for example, was a day off to do some personal work. Owner Tom was probably already open, catching up with some regulars. The bar still had the extra cocktails he'd ordered yesterday, enough to last him the day. Guan Qiong stood by the window, taking a deep breath of the midday air, feeling more relaxed than ever. Sleeping in until noon was truly the life you only get when you're on vacation. Having a simple lunch from the bar, Guan Qiong retreated to his room instead of going out. There wasn't much to see outside, so he might as well continue practicing magic. Guan Qiong snapped his fingers, closing the window, plunging the room into darkness. Then, as he rubbed his fingers together, scattered points of light shot out like stars, coating the ceiling. He looked at his right hand. It folded, and magical energy surged out, forming a magical circuit. A condensed crown, a flowing river, and evaporating mist instantly took shape, the three states beginning to cycle. Under Guan Qiong's control, the crown expanded from its center, forming a cavity that enveloped his right hand. Then, flames erupted. Crimson flames emerged from Guan Qiong's right hand, as if he were wearing a glove made of flame. His hand, nestled within the flames, felt no heat. But the flames lasted only 3 seconds before they began to flutter and sway, the heat radiating uncontrollably. Even with Guan Qiong's full attention and a silvery glow in his eyes, it had no effect. Guan Qiong shook his right hand helplessly, and the flames quickly dissipated into the air, leaving no trace. The silver light in his eyes faded, revealing the fatigue beneath. However, that fatigue slowly faded after a few deep breaths. The silent, wandless fire spell proved incredibly difficult to control. Without the stability of his wand, Guan Qiong could only maintain it for 3 seconds at most before losing control of the fire spell's circuitry, causing it to expand and dissipate heat. This was far from the effect of Flame Bella, even though his proficiency in fire spells far surpassed that of other young wizards and even some adult wizards. Guan Qiong rubbed his chin, waiting until he felt his energy return before deciding to try again. As he clapped his hands together, a silver light flashed in his eyes, and a magic circuit formed in an instant, then, under his control, began to spread. In the first second, crimson flames emerged from his hands, spreading along his wrists, up his arms, and quickly reaching his shoulders. In the second, the flames continued to spread, rising above his collarbone to touch his chin, then descending, covering his entire upper body like a flood. In the third second, flames engulfed his entire body. Crimson flames entwined his black hair, dancing like seaweed. His once handsome face, beneath the crimson flames, became like a demonic ghost, especially as he chuckled softly, the flames forming a wide, smiling face. In the fourth second, Guan Qiong's hands swiftly spread apart, and the flames scattered outward, as if exploding from the center. Fortunately, Guan Qiong managed to control the magic circuits in time, preventing them from completely exploding. Instead, they dissipated into the air, preventing them from igniting anything else in the room. He panted heavily, supporting himself on the desk with his arms, and slowly sat down, his eyes etched with lingering fatigue. It was indeed too much of a stretch. Although it covered his entire body, it couldn't be sustained. Guan Qiong shook his head helplessly. It seemed he would have to be a 3-second flame man for a while longer. But he wasn't discouraged. He had improved significantly since he left Hogwarts a month ago. Back then, his silent and wandless spells were limited to the illumination spell. Unlike now, he had mastered all but a fire spell. Given more time, he believed he could reach the level of Flame Bella. With continued practice, perhaps even the Avenger Laval. However, he still hadn't figured out how Laval achieved the same ability to materialize flames, and for the time being, he couldn't find a direction to practice. Fortunately, there was still plenty of time. He was only 13, so he had plenty of time to slowly learn. Having recovered, Guan Qiong stopped trying the fire spell and turned to look at another object on his desk. A tape recorder. The wreckage. It was a small, compact cassette recorder, somewhat similar to the one Star-Lord used in the movies Guan Qiong had seen in his past life, but more basic. Guan Qiong had used some connections to buy it, then disassembled it to practice magic. He extended his right hand, pointed it at the recorder, and twisted his fingers counterclockwise. Repaired. Guan Qiong cast the repair spell, and the wreckage of the recorder before him began to change, but under Guan Qiong's control, it didn't immediately recover. Like a rewind, the last removed part levitated, followed by the second to last, and the two joined together. Then, the third, and the fourth. The entire scene unfolded like a slow-motion rewind, the tape recorder slowly beginning its rebirth. But about a third of the way through, the repair stalled, and Guan Qiong's eyes lit up with a silver gleam. He exhaled heavily, his right hand helplessly lowering it. The one-third repaired tape recorder fell onto the desk with a clatter, and several more parts scattering. 1/3, that's some progress, Guan Qiong thought. Previously, he could only manage a quarter. After stretching his shoulders, Guan Qiong stopped, extending his left hand and snapping his fingers. Magical energy instantly surged, and all the parts of the tape recorder began to move, repairing and joining together in the air at astonishing speed. In a split second, a brand new tape recorder appeared before Guan Qiong. He pressed the play button, and a soft, melodious violin tune emanated, drifting through the room like a lost spirit. He snapped his fingers again, and the window of the room opened. It was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The midsummer breeze blew through the streets of London, bringing with it the aroma of black tea. Guan Qiong leaned back in his chair. He didn't have the habit of drinking afternoon tea, but this time was obviously more suitable for reading than continuing to practice magic. A book half the thickness of a city wall floated from the side to Guan Qiong and opened to the same position as last time. A Year with the Snowmen of Zizan, written by Gilderoy Lockhart. The prototype of the tape recorder was the Walkman Portable Player, TPS, L2, launched by Sony Corporation of Japan in 1979. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Those Stories. As strange as it may sound, Guan Qiong actually enjoyed reading Lockhart's books. On his desks sat a set of Lockhart's books: Break with a Ghost, Travels with Ghouls, Holidays with Hags, Travels with Trolls, Voyages with Vampires, Wandering with Werewolves, and the one Guan Qiong was holding, A Year with the Yeti of Western Tibet. He knew what kind of person Lockhart was. None of the stories in these books were based on his own experiences. He had plagiarized the experiences and achievements of others and published them under his own name. As for the original owners, Lockhart had cast a memory charm on them, making them forget these events. But this didn't stop his writing from being brilliant. If you ignore the self-aggrandizement, these books are truly excellent novels. Honestly, even the original owners wouldn't be able to tell such a compelling story. Lockhart's grasp of emotion, control of plot, and exquisite description of environment and events were truly a gift. Of course, Guan Qiong didn't think Lockhart was right, but simply felt he'd taken the wrong path. If he'd chosen to be a chronicler, a novelist, perhaps he could have achieved greater success. Perhaps he could even sell these books to the human world, under the guise of fantasy novels. But these books were incredibly expensive. That guy must have made a killing. Guan Qiong touched the thick cover of A Year with the Yeti of Western Tibet and felt a deep sense of regret. Just buying this set of books had wiped out his entire savings. If he hadn't found a new way to make money at the Leaky Cauldron, he'd likely have been living in poverty for a while until Hogwarts opened. But there was no other way. This year, Lockhart would be teaching defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts, and this set of books was his designated textbook, so it was a must-buy. Guan Qiong paused as he thought of this, a calculation flashing in his eyes. Hogwarts had a lot of students. If each student got a set, multiplying the price by that, even after deducting printing costs and other promotional expenses, Lockhart would have made a considerable profit. According to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Lockhart would be cast with his own oblivion charm at the last moment, forgetting everything about himself, including his name. He couldn't recall what happened next, but it wouldn't have been a good outcome. Thinking about it that way, that large sum of money wouldn't be without an owner. Guan Qiong pondered, snapping her fingers lightly. A piece of parchment and a quill flew out to her side, and the quill began to scratch across the parchment. By then, perhaps. Guan Qiong patted the book in her hands, a smile playing on her lips. This book is truly excellent. The content is engaging, and the price is quite high. A more expensive price is better. The more you earn, the more money you can earn. With a delighted heart, Guan Qiong began to flip through the pages until the sun gradually set, the golden sunset casting a brilliant white veil over the windowsill. Guan Qiong closed A Year with a Western Tibetan snowman, breathed a sigh of relief, and rubbed her eyes to ease her fatigue. I have to say this book is truly well written, especially the final twist, which is both unexpected and fitting. When the final veil is lifted, and I reflect on the preceding chapters, I realize how much foreshadowing has already been going on, though I hadn't noticed. A Year with the Yeti of Western Tibet centers on two main characters, Lockhart, whose actual identity remains to be determined, and Zuma. After hearing stories of the Yeti of Western Tibet, Lockhart becomes intrigued and sets out to find it. After several stops, he arrives in the Himalayan region of Western Tibet, where he finds a local guide, Zuma. According to the book, Zuma is a remarkably robust middle-aged man with a physique capable of melting ice and snow, capable of trekking 80 kilometers through the snow alone, without any supplies or assistance. Together, the two embark on a quest to find the Yeti of Western Tibet. Along the way, they encounter numerous magical creatures unique to the Himalayas, as well as fellow seekers, wizards, ordinary people, Westerners, and a number of Easterners. Occasionally, they would encounter poachers poaching rare animals. In such situations, the brave and kind Lockhart would step in, driving the humans away and rescuing the animals. Throughout these efforts, Zuma remained at his side, offering his assistance, and the two eventually became close friends. Lockhart learned that Zuma, too, despised the poachers. If Lockhart hadn't intervened, he would have torn the poachers to pieces and rescued the animals. As he spoke, Zuma's eyes shone with hatred and a cold glint, like a 1,000-year-old glacier. Lockhart couldn't understand the source of Zuma's hatred, and the two continued their search for the Western Zangeti. Finally, after a year-long search, they discovered traces of the Western Zangeti. Upon learning the Yeti's precise location, Lockhart was overjoyed, while Zuma expressed concern. The two began their final trek. After 2 weeks of trekking, they finally saw the Yeti's footprints, but also saw signs of other human activity nearby. Lockhart and Zuma eventually found the Yeti, but to their surprise, they discovered it was actually a human disguise, created solely to attract the annual tourists and boost development. Lockhart was deeply disappointed, while Zuma was relieved. But danger was approaching. A poaching gang suddenly appeared and surrounded them, targeting Zuma. As Lockhart hesitated, Zuma recognized the poachers. It turned out that Zuma's father had been killed by the poachers, but the Yeti, in death, looked like a human, making it impossible to sell. They were here to capture Zuma alive. A battle ensued, and in a matter of seconds, Zuma transformed into a 5-meter-tall, white-haired humanoid. The enemy was well armed, and Zuma began to suffer injuries from the firearms. Then, the kind-hearted and righteous Lockhart intervened, using magic to defeat the poachers and rescue Zuma. Finally, a blanket of snow covered the Red River and the corpses on the ground. Zuma and Lockhart stared at each other in the snow. "Zuma is fake, this is the real me," Zuma said slowly. "Real and fake are relative. To me, Zuma is real, and the Zizan Yeti is just a false legend," Lockhart said firmly. A smile broke out on Zuma's huge, ferocious face. He slowly retreated, his figure merging with the world and disappearing in the whiteness of the snow. Then, upon returning, Lockhart wrote a book a year with the Zizan Yeti. Guan Qiong sighed. Lockhart truly deserved to die. Chapter 83 Nocturne Alley. Customers came and went in the leaky cauldron, and the clock hands turned round and round. It was another day off. Guan Qiong chose not to stay in the room, but prepared to go out for a walk. After going downstairs, the leaky cauldron was already crowded with customers. The owner, Tom, was sitting at the bar, chatting with a middle-aged bald customer. After greeting Tom and borrowing his wand, Guan Qiong walked across the bar and into a small walled courtyard. 3 bricks above and 2 to the right of the trash can, Guan Qiong picked up her wand and tapped the wall 3 times. Starting from that brick, the entire wall shook, and the bricks began to shrink to the sides, revealing a passage in the middle. Diagon Alley. It was not yet the start of the school year, so there were not many people in Diagon Alley, but there were also quite a few. The sound of footsteps mixed with the various sounds from the nearby shops, so it was not deserted. Guan Qiong first went to the wizard post office to mail the letter to Hermione and Ron. This wasn't the same 2 replies he'd written the previous time. After that, they exchanged 2 more letters. Ron and Harry confided in him about the joys of life at the Burrow, playing Quidditch together, cleaning up goblins, and so on, and they strongly invited Gwen to come over. But Gwen probably had their free time, thinking about their unfinished summer homework. Besides, he really didn't have time. He still had some finishing work to do at the leaky cauldron, and by the time he finished, Hogwarts would likely have already started. Hermione declined his invitation, but suggested they meet in Diagon Alley before school started, when she would be in London buying textbooks. Gwen wasn't surprised, nor did she have any second thoughts. After sending the letters, Gwen walked down Diagon Alley. The cobblestone streets were clean and tidy, and the shops along the way were filled with all sorts of magical and interesting things. Everything seemed so vibrant and whimsical. On the way, Gwen bought a mango and sesame ice cream for 10 nuts. He preferred mango, but wasn't too fond of the sesame flavor. When he had almost finished his ice cream, Gwen finally reached a corner of Diagon Alley. After finishing her ice cream in a few bites, Guan Qiong took out her boss Tom's wand and pointed it at her clothes. Her casual clothes began to transform, a hood sprouting from the collar, transforming into a black cloak that completely obscured her form. A simple transfiguration. But Guan Qiong didn't stop there. He raised his wand and flicked it gently. A silver light appeared at the tip, cascading down like a stream of moonlight, shrouding Guan Qiong's body. Guan Qiong's aura began to fade, and his already dark figure blended seamlessly into the surroundings, as if he were a part of the darkness. This was a dispelling spell, derived from unicorn magic. Before he finished, Guan Qiong no longer hesitated, walked out of his corner, and headed in a certain direction. He encountered few people along the way, and the surrounding shops gradually dwindled. The clean, Bright atmosphere slowly faded as Guan Qiong walked, replaced by a dark and eerie atmosphere. The ground went from clean to filthy, and as the surrounding shops began to multiply, Guan Qiong finally reached his destination, Nocturne Alley. The air was filled with a chilling chill, and the items sold in the shops had changed considerably, shrunken human heads, giant spiders, dark, murky potions, and swarms of writhing snakes. It was a stark contrast to Diagon Alley. Guan Qiong paid no attention to these things, strolling briskly to a shop with a familiar sign on the door, Borgin and Burke's. Guan Qiong pushed the door open, returning everything to normal, and walked in. The interior was spacious and dim, with burn marks on the floor and walls. Strange objects lay around, like withered human hands and hideous masks. In the middle of the shop, a hunched man stood behind a massive counter, squinting his eyes as he examined something. Hearing the door open, he looked up and saw Guan Qiong standing in the doorway. "Welcome, my dear little genius. I thought you'd be here tonight," Mr. Borgin said in a slick voice, setting down his items and stepping out of the counter to greet Guan Qiong. "I wouldn't come to this place at night." A light appeared before Mr. Borgin, the handwriting firm and blunt. "I don't think you have anything to fear. With your strength, no one in Nocturne Alley would dare to mess with you," Mr. Borgin said as he led Guan Qiong to the counter and pointed out the items on it. "This is a recent shipment from Egypt. I'd appreciate your help in taking a good look at it. Of course, it would be even better if you could repair it." Mr. Borgin placed the palm-sized golden boat on the counter into a transparent glass case and made way for Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong walked over to the counter, activated her magical perspective, and began to examine the golden boat. Guan Qiong's magical perspective revealed the boat's magical circuitry. It possessed a complex magical structure, but many parts were broken and disconnected, making it incoherent. Furthermore, it had 2 layers of magical circuitry, just like Guan Qiong's Nodong. As Guan Qiong examined the golden boat, Mr. Borgin stood nervously by, holding a wand, wanting to aim at Guan Qiong, but he hesitated. He looked at the burn marks on the floor and wall, a pained expression on his face, and took a tiny, imperceptible step back. "Reparable, 5 galleons." At that moment, Guan Qiong's light appeared before Mr. Borgin, the white writing gleaming with a golden sheen. Mr. Borgin's eyes flickered, calculating the price of this item and its potential sale price. It seemed there was a government expedition in South America that needed something just like this. A government expedition, the price would be high. A thought flashed through Mr. Borgin's mind, and he nodded. "Okay." Guan Qiong's heart skipped a beat, but her face remained calm. She nodded slightly and drew out Boss Tom's wand. Mr. Borgin grew nervous again, his hand tightly gripping his wand, his eyes fixed on Guan Qiong's movements. Guan Qiong ignored Mr. Borgin, directing his own magic towards the broken circuit of the golden boat, just as he had done with the Mirror of Erased. He had excellent control over his magic. Although his wand wasn't particularly effective, it was still manageable. With a steady influx of magic, a subtle effect began to appear on the golden boat, emitting a faint golden glow. Guan Qiong's expression remained unchanged as he continued to repair the ship calmly, his magic flowing freely. If anyone else had come, they would have been running out of magic by now, but his magic was constantly growing, so the current consumption was nothing. Chapter 84 The Generous Mr. Borgin. Time ticked by, and the already dim street grew even darker, evidently indicating the sun was about to set. With a soft hum, the golden boat trembled. Though its exterior remained unchanged, its interior was completely different. Guan Qiong also lowered her wand, vacating her seat at the counter. Mr. Borgin eagerly stepped forward, removed the golden boat from its glass case, and examined it closely. Perfectly restored, after a moment, a smile crossed Mr. Borgin's face, and as he looked at Guan Qiong, his tone became more sincere. "You're a wonderful child. Working with you is the best decision I've made this year." "Me too." Light flashed, and Guan Qiong wore a faint smile, though her heart remained calm. Mr. Borgin paid no attention. He lowered his head, rummaging through the counter, and pulled out 5 gleaming gold galleons, laying them out in a row on the counter. "This is your reward. I'll look forward to our next collaboration," Mr. Borgin said. Guan Qiong glanced at the gold galleons, which flew up and landed in Guan Qiong's pockets, clattering against each other with a pleasant sound. "Me too." Guan Qiong nodded to Mr. Borgin, and a light appeared and faded. Guan Qiong then turned and left, and Mr. Borgin didn't stay. After leaving Borgin and Burke's, Guan Qiong tapped his wand on his clothes, transforming back to his previous form, obscuring his features. Then, a silver light like moonlight emanated from his wand, obliterating his presence. He didn't linger any longer, nor did he intend to explore Nocturne Alley. He headed straight for Diagon Alley. That was the end of his side hustle for the day. His encounter with Mr. Borgin was full of chance, and it wasn't a pleasant one. It all started when Mr. Borgin walked into the Leaky Cauldron and ordered a gin and gin at the bar. He seemed to have just returned from collecting a valuable magical item. Although his face remained calm, the way he occasionally reached into his pockets revealed something hidden. As Guan Qiong handed him the gingini, he opened the magic circuit and examined the pocket. The mask-shaped magic circuit was relatively dense, but it was broken in several places. Guan Qiong hadn't paid much attention to this aspect, but he had clearly underestimated Mr. Borgin's sophistication. Just by observing the change in his eyes, Mr. Borgin knew the young man had discovered something. Later, when Tom, the shopkeeper, came out to chat with Mr. Borgin, Guan Qiong listened in and realized that the man in front of him was the owner of Borgin and Burke's in Nocturne Alley. Nocturne Alley was not the hotbed of evil and vicious dark wizards he had previously believed. It was simply a magical black market, trading shady items such as magical items from tombs, and prohibited herbs and magical creatures. That was the most it could be. After all, this was a civilized society, and there was the Ministry of Magic watching over it. In fact, if you think about it carefully, Nocturne Alley was almost known to everyone. If the dark wizards there didn't commit human sacrifices or conduct human experiments, they would have been eliminated by the Ministry long ago, and there would be no way they could continue to exist. Mr. Borgin also learned of Guan Qiong's name, the aphasic wizard whose gifts even Dumbledore recognized. The two didn't exchange words during their first meeting, but a few days later, Mr. Borgin sent him a letter inviting him to Borgin and Burke's in Nocturne Alley to look over the items. The letter offered him 3 galleons for repairing the mask if it could be repaired. Who knows why Mr. Borgin was so convinced that a young wizard, barely out of first year, possessed the ability to repair magical artifacts. Perhaps he was unwilling to accept the loss and wanted to try every possible means. Perhaps it was the wizarding world's blind trust in Dumbledore, or perhaps Guan Qiong's attention had caught his eye. Regardless, he sent a letter to Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong reflected on the damaged state of the mask and recalled his previous actions with a mirror of erased. Then, he took the letter to his boss, Tom. While tempted, this wasn't the school setting, and outsiders were skeptical. He wouldn't act rashly without sufficient expertise. Compared to Mr. Borgin, who lived in Nocturne Alley and whom she had only met once, Tom, the owner of Diagon Alley and close to Hannah, was clearly more trustworthy. He read the letter several times but didn't immediately refuse. "Take my wand and go. If anything happens, shoot a red flame at the sky, and I'll send for you," Tom said. He could see that the child had already made up his mind and was only seeking him as a safeguard. Rather than refusing and then having Guan Qiong go secretly, it was better to agree now. At least if something did go wrong, there would be a solution. So one afternoon, Guan Qiong went to Borgin and Burke's to try to repair the mask. Things were going smoothly. Just as Guan Qiong had imagined, all he had to do was control his magic power and connect the magic circuits to form a complete circuit for the magic item to function normally. However, a minor incident did occur. Perhaps Mr. Borgin hadn't noticed, or perhaps he hadn't considered it enough, but the magical items he collected were generally tainted with elements of dark magic, and dark magic often implies unpredictability and unexpected situations. Therefore, when handling dark magic items, one would typically take protective measures to ensure safety. But this time, Mr. Borgin hadn't prepared anything for Guan Qiong. The repaired mask suddenly sprang to life, springing towards Guan Qiong's face like a spring, ready to be draped across it. In the nick of time, Guan Qiong's eyes shone with a silver light, and her magical energy surged with unprecedented force. A solidified ground, a flowing river, and evaporating mist instantly formed and circulated. Crimson flames erupted from Guan Qiong's body, then exploded outward, an endless stream of flames surging until it engulfed everything around it. The mask, blasted by the flames, flew forward, slamming into the wall, and everything around it burst into flames. Only after Mr. Borgin's curses rang out did Guan Qiong retract the flames, and darkness enveloped the surroundings. Of course, each of the items had been protected, so they weren't significantly affected. However, the floor, walls, and ceiling of Borgin and Burke's were completely charred. Mr. Borgin, desperate, sought compensation from Guan Qiong, but Guan Qiong promptly summoned his boss, Tom, who then forced Mr. Borgin to pay Guan Qiong even more. Ultimately, Mr. Borgin's safety was inadequate, and Guan Qiong was merely defending himself. Guan Qiong thought the matter was over, but a few days later, Mr. Borgin sent another letter. Perhaps the mask had sold for a considerable sum. This time, Borgin and Burks was covered in a glass cover, enshrined in countless protective spells. Chapter 85 Extra, Daily Prophet April Fool's Day Special Edition. It's reported that Quirrell, the Hogwarts defense against the dark arts professor, has disappeared for unknown reasons. Hogwarts has yet to provide an explanation, but there's reason to believe this is related to a curse cast on the class by a mysterious figure. Currently, Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore is searching for a replacement for the new defense against the dark arts professor. Whether he can find one remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Harry Potter, the savior, has concluded his first year at Hogwarts. He's an excellent Quidditch seeker, but his grades aren't as impressive as his Quidditch prowess. Currently, he has 1 distinction, flying, 3 passes, charms, transfiguration, and herbology, 2 ordinary grades, astronomy and defense against the dark arts, and 2 passes, history of magic and potions. His aphasic student, Guan Qiong, who enrolled at the same time, has excelled, currently achieving distinctions in 7 subjects, including 3 full marks, charms, potions, and history of magic. Dumbledore truly deserves to be called the greatest educator. He discovered this child and enrolled him, even though no one had much faith in him last year. Meanwhile, some parents have reported to the Ministry of Magic that Dumbledore, the Hogwarts headmaster, had committed serious dereliction of duty, using personal favoritism to favor Harry Potter, the savior, leading his Gryffindor house to win the House Cup. More details will be released in the next issue. Today, the Magic Circuit Research Institute, established by the Eastern Wizard Fangyu, officially opened and is recruiting assistants and other positions within the wizarding community. As long as you can use magic, have a passion for research, a desire for progress, and are willing to dedicate yourself to the development of the world, don't hesitate, this is the best place for you. The Speechless Man at Hogwarts will be available tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Author Yifan Wiedeo hereby announces this. Additional chapter rules. Leader Alliance members receive 1 additional chapter, Silver Alliance members receive 2 additional chapters, and Gold Alliance members receive 3 additional chapters. 1,000 monthly votes for the month will grant you 1 additional chapter, and 10,000 total recommendation votes will grant you 1 additional chapter. Stay tuned. Recently, the Ministry of Magic has discovered a dark magic society dedicated to a figure known as the Starting River God. They frequently offer book sacrifices in an attempt to gain the power of recommendation. The following is a list of recently discovered sacrifices. From Witch Hunter to Lord of the Empire, by Panda's Big Wooden House. Hogwarts, Harry on the Witch's Path, by Monk and Barbarian. The Rainbow Dragon's Planar Journey, by a Child. Miss Witch, Please Respect Yourself, by Sanguzi. Master Sihan of the Primordial Era, by Xiaheo is a Newbie. Mystery, Causal Sequence, by Moonflower on the Cloud. It is understood that Moonflower on the Cloud once communicated with the Supreme God, the Lord of Mysteries, and the diving squid under the name Ring of Fate, but due to her inability to accommodate this special ability, she changed the title. Thank you for your continued support. Chapter 86, Mixing New Wine. By the time Guan Qiong returned to the Leaky Cauldron, it was already dark. The bar had become much busier that night, and the noise threatened to lift the roof off the floor. As Guan Qiong was about to go upstairs, the owner, Tom, called out to him. Hey, here's the ingredients you requested. Honestly, they cost a fortune, so don't mess it up. From under the bar, Tom pulled a bag of emerald green leaves and handed them to Guan Qiong. The leaves were small but long, each about the length of Guan Qiong's forearm. They were covered in tiny white hairs, resembling tails from a distance. Guan Qiong surveyed the herbs in his hand, especially through his magical vision, which shone a luminescent green and was truly beautiful. He gave Tom a thumbs up and a smile spread across his face. Don't worry, I've never let you suffer a loss. He surveyed the items on the bar, then flicked his right hand. Several bottles of liquor and glasses levitated, floating to his side like accompanying ghosts. Nodding to Tom, Guan Qiong headed upstairs. Looks like we'll be able to try our new cocktail soon, a customer at the bar said expectantly. Of course, Guan Qiong is a rare talent, said the owner, Tom, with a smile. Remember to bring more money next time you come. I promise you won't be disappointed. Hey, I've never been disappointed. The customer raised his chin and took a long sip, his eyes narrowed slightly, and a sound of satisfaction escaped his lips. This feeling is truly refreshing. Guan Qiong returned to his room, first cleaning the desk and placing all the wine and glasses on it. Of course, there was also a bag of herbs given by the owner, Tom. Tsukiroi leaves, which typically grow around cemeteries, can be used to brew potions to strengthen the body and increase strength. However, if left untreated, they can also cause muscle overactivity, eventually leading to cramps and other problems. Guan Qiong snapped his left fingers, and 2 books flew out of a nearby box and floated in front of him. Cocktail mixing, hundreds of cocktail recipes over the past century and basic potions, a primer on the treatment of various herbs were the secrets to Guan Qiong's ability to create such popular cocktails. Of course, these 2 items weren't enough, they were still missing the most important element, the magical perspective. Guan Qiong activated his magical perspective, and the magical circuitry of the Tsukao leaf appeared before him, resembling a flat caterpillar, with countless spikes piercing its center. He first flipped to the page on the Tsukao leaf and basic potions, preparing various herbs and examined its preparation methods. There were 3 methods: boiling in a solution, burning with flames, and soaking in alcohol, each corresponding to the needs of a different potion. Guan Qiong nodded and snapped his right fingers, sending the crucible and alcohol lamp from the box flying out and placing them on the desk. He cast a spring of water spell to create clear water and poured it into the crucible. A flame spell ignited the alcohol spell to heat it. Once it boiled, Guan Qiong rolled the Tsukao leaf into coil and placed it inside. Simultaneously, flames erupted from Guan Qiong's palm, incinerating another Tsukao leaf into a gray powder. Then, under the control of a levitation spell, it piled onto the table in a wall. Soaking in alcohol was simple. Simply fill an empty cup with the wine he had brought with him and place a Tsukao leaf inside. Guan Qiong used his magical vision to observe all 3 treatment methods simultaneously. From his perspective, the magic circuits of the Tsukao leaf in the crucible began to change shape, like a curled-up caterpillar, transforming from a slender form into a spherical shape. The magic circuits within the flames shattered and dissipated within the powder, leaving only traces of magic power lingering, though these glowed a brilliant white light. Only the Tsukao leaf, soaked in alcohol, seemed swollen and widened. Parts of the magic circuits had merged into a single point, simplifying the pattern, though the overall pattern remained unchanged. Guan Qiong nodded. Herbs typically undergo various treatments to suit different needs. Some enhance the effects of the herb itself, others modify it to complement other herbs, and still others simply utilize its inherent properties. Guan Qiong, of course, desired the Tsukao leaf's strengthening properties, but these were too potent. Using them directly would harm the average person, so he needed to tone them down. The current state was perfect, and he didn't need to go into further processing. Next, he needed to find a way to incorporate this effect into cocktails. Guan Qiong snapped his fingers, and a copy of Cocktail Mixing, hundreds of cocktail recipes from the past century floated before him. He quickly selected several cocktail recipes. 20% sherry, half brandy, ice, lemon juice, 1/3 rum, 1/4 tequila, a pinch of salt, and a splash of beer. Sherry, tequila, gin. Soon, Guan Qiong had 4 cocktails ready, and 4 tequila leaves soaked nearby. He then added the tequila leaves to each of the 4 drinks and waited quietly for the reaction. Of course, it wasn't just a matter of adding them and calling it a day. He also needed to ensure that the tequila leaves and the drinks wouldn't produce any other effects, especially ensuring the integrity of the magic circuits, preventing them from breaking or dissipating, or becoming stronger or thicker. The first recipe didn't work. The magic circuits within the tequila leaves dissolved, rendering them ineffective. Guan Qiong looked at the first drink and snapped his fingers. Everything was back to normal. Under the influence of the restoration charm, the blended wine and Tsukao leaves began to return to their original state, as if time had flown backwards. The shattered magic circuits dissolved and reunited, and the mixed wine separated, forming fractures within the glass. Guan Qiong then used the levitation charm to separate the clumps of wine into separate clumps, returning them to their respective bottles. The Tsukao leaves also returned to their original state, and under Guan Qiong's control, they remained as freshly brewed. This was a discovery he had made earlier, The restoration charm could restore altered magic circuits to their original state after a short period of time. However, there were significant limitations. First, the duration couldn't be too long, no more than 10 minutes at most. Second, the altered magic circuits couldn't mix with other magic circuits, effectively creating new ones like potions. But for Guan Qiong, this was perfectly sufficient. This discovery also allowed him to save a significant amount of herbal waste when mixing these cocktails. Otherwise, the loss of raw materials to create a cocktail that was just right would have been astronomical, and Boss Tom wouldn't have wanted to work with him. Chapter 87: The Special Effects of 4 Kinds of Wine. Soon, the second drink's effects took effect. Looking at the nearly clumped magic circuits, Guan Qiong sighed helplessly and snapped his fingers. The drinks separated and returned to their respective bottles. Tsukuyoha's magic circuits also returned to their previous state, repairing and expanding. The problem isn't the spread of the magic circuits, but the concentration. After all, if they're too dispersed, the cocktail's effect is weak. But if they're concentrated into a point, the effect is uncertain. It could be terrifyingly powerful, or it could transform into something else. Of course, a completely diffused magic circuit wouldn't work either. Guan Qiong needed a magic circuit that dispersed in form but remained intact, like the rock cakes he'd eaten. Although empty inside, the shell remained intact, retaining its basic effects, albeit weakened. Guan Qiong then looked at the third drink. As expected, Tsukuyoha's magic circuits had also failed, swirling and concentrating towards the center, forming something like a hemp rope. He wasn't surprised, nor was he disappointed. Finding a universally suitable cocktail pairing is inherently difficult, requiring repeated experimentation. Success on the first try is an ideal scenario. Guan Qiong has experimented with each of the 3 drinks currently sold at the Leaky Cauldron at least 100 times. He's researched various ways to process herbs, and how each drink reacts to them. Once he finds the perfect cocktail, he needs to taste the cocktail to ensure the herbs don't taste strange. Not necessarily more delicious, but at least not strange. Some herbs have distinct flavors of their own, requiring Guan Qiong to experiment further, masking those flavors with the addition of more alcohol. This process is practically like creating a new cocktail. If Guan Qiong didn't possess the handy gift of magic, allowing him to recreate cocktails, he wouldn't even be able to find the perfect combination even if he tried everything in the Leaky Cauldron. Guan Qiong looked at the 4th drink. As expected, it didn't work either. While Tsukuyoha's magic circuits hadn't changed significantly, retaining their effects, the drink gave off a foul, nauseating smell, making it unappealing. Guan Qiong snapped his fingers, restoring the drink. But remembering the taste, he thought better of it and, instead of pouring it back into the bottle, discarded it. Guan Qiong then called cocktail mixing hundreds of cocktail recipes over the past century to float before him again and began experimenting with other cocktails. While the Leaky Cauldron didn't have some drinks, and he couldn't replicate every one of them, some were still possible, and that section already contained 20 or 30 different recipes. It looked like another sleepless night. Guan Qiong stretched, thinking to himself. But thinking of the potential benefits, motivation surged within him. Time passed slowly, the drinks in the bottle flew in and out, and magical lights occasionally appeared in the room. Fortunately, Guan Qiong had plenty of magic power, allowing him to use these spells all day. Finally, as the first rays of morning sun shone across London, Guan Qiong let out a deep breath and slumped back in his chair. Before him sat a glass of wine, white on top and green on the bottom. Done. He rubbed his tired eyes, his spirits high. His luck had been pretty good tonight. He'd spent 3 days trying to find the perfect balance for the blend of the Belando, ensuring the cocktail's effect and flavor were both perfect. Guan Qiong took a sip from the cocktail in front of him, and a refreshing, cooling sensation instantly washed over him. Every muscle in his body seemed to come alive, trembling unconsciously, but not violently, as if being massaged from the inside out. When the effects wore off, he felt only a little lighter, like a workout followed by a shower, feeling refreshed and clear. Let's call this drink the refills. Guan Qiong mentally came up with a name for it. With that, the Leaky Cauldron now had 4 special effect drinks, and the contract he'd signed with owner Tom was complete. Among them, Refresh's effect is to provide a slight strengthening of the body, making it feel relaxed. Jingani's effect is to stimulate the wizard's magic, keeping it constantly active and facilitating spellcasting. Of course, some simply enjoy the feeling of active magic, which makes them feel like they've returned to their youth. The rando's effect is calming, clear-headed, and allows for more detailed thinking, which is why it's the least popular of the four. Langret, on the other hand, can make wizards feel pain, evoking the deepest emotions and causing them to immerse themselves in memories. This is due to the psychedelic herbs it contains. The owner, Tom, is particularly fond of this drink, and Guan Qiong suspects he has a past he doesn't want to discuss. After all, he only has one name, no one knows his last name, and he's never heard of his wife. However, these matters are of little concern to Guan Qiong. He simply needs to provide the leaky cauldron with special liquors and wait to be paid. Guan Qiong drank refresh, letting it dispel the fatigue of the night. Of course, it was not as effective as some potions. Given the price, its effects couldn't be very strong. In reality, none of the four cocktails Guan Qiong brought were particularly potent. For example, it would take 100 drinks of this refresh to achieve the same strengthening effect Guan Qiong experienced after consuming a single softened rock pancake. But that was enough. Guan Qiong was selling alcohol, not potions. It was simply that these drinks had some added benefits. It was these added benefits that attracted so many customers. After all, if a drink tasted good, many people would appreciate it. And if a drink not only tasted good but also boosted your health, everyone would be eager to try it. And if a drink not only boosted your health but also made you feel like you were 18 again, strengthening your body and activating your key, magic power, like you did back then, everyone would be crazy about it. Guan Qiong's drinks were just that kind of drink. While they might not drive people crazy, they certainly attracted a large number of people to try them. This was the reason he signed a profit-sharing agreement with his boss, Tom. This agreement guaranteed Guan Qiong a monthly share of gold galleons, even after school started, making his life much better. School was almost starting. Guan Qiong looked out the window, her mind active. Soon she would be able to meet people from school again, Harry, Ron and the others. And Hermione. Chapter 88. The incident begins. Time flew by, and there were still 4 days until the start of the Hogwarts term. Guan Qiong stood at the counter of Borgin and Burke's, concentrating on a wooden figurine in his hands. It was a magical item unearthed in Japan, apparently from the 11th century, imbued with powerful dark magic. The magical circuits within were a tangled mess, disconnected at various points and then connected again, like a ball of thread with no end in sight. Guan Qiong hadn't wanted to repair it, considering the time and effort involved, and the uncertainty of a successful repair. He had also planned to go to Diagon Alley with Hermione to buy textbooks that day, along with Harry and Ron. However, Mr. Borgin offered a hefty price of 12 gold galleons for the repair, and since there was still time to make a final profit before summer vacation, he decided to make the trip. Perhaps he could even save a lost young wizard. Sure enough, as Guan Qiong untied the wooden figurine's threads and prepared to connect them in a logical manner, an emerald green flame suddenly lit up from the nearby stone fireplace. A small, gaunt-faced wizard with emerald green eyes emerged from the fireplace and fell to the ground. Guan Qiong could clearly hear the sound of his round glasses shattering. Harry, dazed, stumbled to his feet. His skin was bruised and swollen, and covered in ash from the fireplace. He looked utterly awful. One moment, he was at the Weasley Burrow, about to use flu powder to join them in Diagon Alley to buy textbooks and other supplies. The next, he was here. The surroundings were utterly dark, like a gloomy forest or a sewer. He picked up his shattered glasses and tried to survey his surroundings. This seemed like a wizarding shop, Harry thought to himself, but it was definitely not a normal one. Strange objects lay scattered around, human hands, eyeballs, even a golden skeleton. Blood-stained playing cards and hideous masks were also scattered around, creating a terrifying scene. Harry gasped in pain as he realized there was someone standing at the counter, staring at him. Oh my god, it was Gwen. Harry stared at Gwen in disbelief, having never expected him to appear at this moment. According to their correspondence, he should have been waiting for them at the Leaky Cauldron before they went to buy textbooks together. Gwen looked at Harry, who had just noticed him, and shook her head. He wasn't alert enough. He hadn't noticed the person standing there immediately, his attention drawn to the strange objects around him. If it had been another dark wizard instead of him, Harry wouldn't have had time to react. Fortunately, Mr. Borgin was out on business, otherwise Harry would have been hung up and interrogated about who he was and what he wanted here. Although Guan had never seen Mr. Borgin do this, he never doubted the methods of the dark wizards who lived in Nocturne Alley. They might not have committed many murders or arson, but they certainly committed a lot of crimes. "Gwen, why are you here? What is this place?" Harry's nervousness subsided. The sight of Gwen gave him an inexplicable sense of relief. Points of light floated in the air, about to form words at Guan Qiong's will, but then Guan Qiong heard a movement outside the door. "Talk to you later," the light formed into another sentence. And before Harry could react, Guan Qiong flicked his left hand, and Harry's glasses instantly repaired. He was lifted up and flung directly into a large black cabinet. Guan Qiong waved the cabinet door shut, considerately leaving a small gap for Harry. This seems to be the original story, Guan Qiong thought. Compared to the first book, his memory of the Chamber of Secrets in the second book was a bit hazy. While he still remembered most of it, he was a little unsure about the small details. But Harry had definitely heard the conversation between Malfoy and his son, that much was certain. Although because of him, it was he, not Mr. Borgin, who was now in the shop. A moment later, as expected, Malfoy walked in, followed by someone who must be his father. The man had the same pale, pointed face as Malfoy, with gray eyes. Unlike Malfoy's feigned coldness, his gaze held genuine indifference, a touch of aristocratic arrogance. "Dune? Why are you here?" Malfoy, seeing Guan Qiong, asked the same question as Harry. The man behind him, hearing Malfoy's question, especially the name, his eyes lit up and he looked at the young man standing behind the counter. Black hair, dark eyes, and a face with oriental features. Yes, the mute young wizard. "You're the kid Draco always mentions, right?" "Hello, I'm Draco's father, Lucius. You can call me Uncle Lucius." Lucius's tone was kind, like an ordinary parent meeting his child's classmates. But Malfoy, standing next to him, found it strange because his father never treated anyone like this, even to Goyle and Crabbe, with a cold expression. "Hello." Points of light appeared in the air, forming a string of words. Guan Qiong's expression was dull, like that of an ordinary shopkeeper meeting a customer, neither warm nor cold. However, a wave of doubt welled up in his heart. What was going on with Lucius? Why was he so friendly? It couldn't be because of Dumbledore, they weren't that close, and Lucius only showed superficial respect for Dumbledore. Guan Qiong knew this. Ahem, isn't Mr. Borgin in the shop? Seeing Guan Qiong's expressionless expression, Lucius didn't say anything else and simply asked about Mr. Borgin. Mr. Borgin is out on business. If you have anything to say, I can pass it on to him. A suspended stream of light formed a message, floating in front of Lucius, allowing him to see it clearly. Is that so? Lucius looked at Guan Qiong, pondering. He wasn't sure if Guan Qiong could pass on this matter. From what Draco had told him at home, the mute young wizard seemed to have a close relationship with a Weasley boy. Of course, Draco was referring to the Weasley boy's insistent attempts to be friends with Guan Qiong, but Guan Qiong dismissed all this and spent most of her time busy with her own affairs. A truly arrogant person doesn't take anyone seriously, and treats others with a perfunctory attitude. Remembering Draco's original words, Lucius felt he should have a higher opinion of the aphasic person. Because from what he knew, he had been in the same state during his school days, with his own opinions and an indifferent attitude towards others, yet he was able to gather a group of people who followed him and obeyed his orders. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 Lucius's Betting Philosophy. Thinking of that man, Lucius's breathing couldn't help but hitch. Even though he knew he was gone, the fear still weighed heavily on him, making it hard for him to breathe. However, he didn't show this in front of Guan Qiong. He spoke in a normal tone. Since Mr. Borgin isn't here, let's leave first and come back when he's here. Guan Qiong nodded, thinking this was perfect. Lucius simply wanted to sell the contraband magic items in his home to Mr. Borgin to evade Ron's father's search. Such internal ministry affairs were not his business right now, nor were they his to control. Guan Qiong narrowed his eyes slightly as he watched Lucius and Malfoy's backs. However, Lucius's attitude just now was so strange and unpredictable. Could this be the aristocracy? Unfortunately, he was an ordinary civilian in both his past and present lives, and he couldn't understand their thoughts. Lucius and Malfoy walked side by side on Nocturne Alley. Malfoy was fascinated by the strange things in the surrounding shops, but unfortunately, Lucius wouldn't let him in. "Draco, how are you getting along with that boy at school?" Lucius suddenly spoke up. "Not bad, I mean, quite good. It's just that Jean is very busy, so we don't spend much time together," Malfoy said, his eyes flickering as he looked at the nearby shops, not daring to turn around. Lucius didn't notice. He nodded, his tone becoming more serious. "Draco, I want you to get along well with that boy. I remember I told you that last year." He paused, his tone more serious. "But that's not enough. I didn't know him well last year. This year, I want you to get closer to Jean, ideally to the point of becoming good friends." "Why, Father?" Draco wondered. While he thought being friends with Jean was a good thing, after all, he was of pure blood, powerful, and a man of status, it clearly wasn't worth his father's grand gesture. "Why?" Lucius turned and looked at Malfoy. "A man who could become the third Dark Lord? Is that reason enough?" Malfoy was shocked. He had never expected his father to say the word Dark Lord to describe a wizard who was still in school. The wizard was even his own age, only in second grade. "Father, this is impossible," Malfoy said in astonishment. "Nothing is impossible," said Lucius. "There has never been a shortage of Dark Lords in this world. When wizards learn to use their power reasonably, it is destined that a transcendent being will be born among them. The only difference is whether this Dark Lord wants to maintain the order of the world, or destroy it, and then rebuild his own rules. I used to think that the boy who survived the catastrophe, Harry Potter, would be the third Dark Lord. After all, he had such an experience and caused the fall of the second Dark Lord when he was a baby, but now I am more inclined to this boy from the East. His talent is so strong that even Dumbledore admires him. At the same time, he has the will to live alone, not influenced by others, and concentrate on his own affairs. You know, he is only 13 years old. Draco, my child, you still need 2 followers to follow you and give your courage." Malfoy blushed. "I thought they were too stupid, and I can't be without subordinates in school. This is why you can't become a Dark Lord, even if you have the support of our family." Lucius looked at Malfoy and said word by word. "A truly powerful person doesn't need to rely on his subordinates, his strength can handle everything." "What about back then?" Malfoy wanted to retort. "They were just a bunch of cowards. Do you think you know whoever really cared about them?" Lucius looked at Malfoy, his eyes filled with a coldness that Malfoy had never seen before. "Do you think he ever really cared about my life? No, even if I swore allegiance to him with my entire family, he wouldn't care. Maybe one day he'd be in a bad mood and kill me." "It's not impossible, Father," Malfoy asked in shock. Lucius took 2 deep breaths, pulling himself out of the fear of that year. "But in the end, he died, I survived, and the family suffered no losses." A confident smile appeared on Lucius's face. He looked at his son, ready to teach him an important lesson. "Draco, you must understand that while the demon lords are powerful, they can't destroy the entire world. If they want the world to obey their rules, they need the help of our great families, whether it's you-know-who or Dumbledore. This is a philosophy of survival. I'm teaching you this lesson now, and I hope you understand what I mean." "Father, are you talking about June? As long as I become close to him, even if he becomes the third Dark Lord, our family won't be affected." Malfoy was smart enough to understand Lucius's meaning. "That's right," Lucius nodded. Elsewhere, Jean watched the Malfoys and their sons leave Borgin and Burke's. Once they were out of sight, Jean was about to let Harry out. But then, another hunched figure appeared outside. "Mr. Borgin, he's just returned." Jean waved his hand, and the cabinet door where Harry was standing slammed shut, blocking out any light. Harry seemed to have been hit on the nose, and a muffled sound of pain escaped, but it quickly faded. "How is it going? Is it fixed?" Mr. Borgin asked anxiously upon entering the shop. The item was valuable, and he already had a buyer and a price agreed upon. He just needed Guan Qiong to fix it. "It'll be quick, just a moment." A flash of light appeared, and Guan Qiong, taking Boss Tom's wand, reconnected the wires he had untied, one by one, according to a rough pattern, much like soldering a circuit. This task was much easier than the previous one, unraveling the ball of wire. In about 10 minutes, the wooden figure was repaired. It seemed to have a consciousness of its own, slowly crawling off the table, then standing up and attempting to pounce on Guan Qiong. But the surrounding glass shield stopped it, its protective magic preventing it from escaping. "Very good, Mr. Borgin walked quickly to the counter, observing the already moving figure with a look of satisfaction on his face. Guan Qiong waited nearby, waiting for Mr. Borgin to pay the galleons. He was in high spirits, even impatient, after making a fortune before the start of school. Chapter 90 Mysterious Ring. But Mr. Borgin didn't immediately produce the galleons. He looked at Guan Qiong, patted his waist, and a hint of sincerity crossed his face. "Is this your last visit this year, child? I remember Hogwarts is about to start, and there are only a few days left," he said. "Yes, but I might come again next summer vacation." Guan Qiong looked at Mr. Borgin in confusion, not understanding what he was trying to say. He wasn't thinking of giving him a parting gift, a big red envelope, right? He didn't think Mr. Borgin was that kind. Besides, his charisma wasn't that high. "Is that so?" Mr. Borgin muttered to himself and began rummaging through the counter. Guan Qiong was sure he wasn't looking for galleons. After a while, he took out a ring and placed it on the counter in front of him. The ring was clearly quite old, with a simple, ancient pattern on it, but it was already blurred. In the center was a grayish-white gem, like a broken bird's egg. The entire ring was riddled with cracks, bent and gem-alike, as if it would shatter into countless pieces in a split second. "This thing has been with me for years. It's very valuable, but unfortunately I can't find a way to repair it," Mr. Borgin explained to Guan Qiong's puzzled gaze. "I guarantee it's worth more than 12 galleons, much more. Of course, if you want galleons, that's fine too. I just thought you might try to fix it." Mr. Borgin pushed the ring toward Guan Qiong, motioning for him to examine it. Guan Qiong understood Mr. Borgin's intention. He wanted to use the ring as payment for his efforts. The damaged ring, once repaired, would be worth far more than the galleons, and the extra money would be a token of his gratitude for Guan Qiong's help. It sounded great, but could it really be repaired? Guan Qiong stared at the ring before him, afraid to even touch it, fearing it would shatter in his hands. From his magical perspective, the ring's magical circuits were also chaotic and fragmented. However, the densely packed magic circuits proved Mr. Borgin's words. This item was indeed quite valuable. Based on his observations, a circuit of this complexity was worth around 30 galleons, if it were intact. So, how should he choose? Guan Qiong pondered. If he chose 12 galleons, he could take it now, risk-free. It would be the most he'd earned this summer, equivalent to 6 weeks of bartending at the Leaky Cauldron. On the other hand, choosing the ring might net him 30 galleons, or he might not even make a single nut. Guan Qiong smiled at Mr. Borgin's gaze. "Thank you very much, Mr. Borgin. I'll give it a try." A point of light appeared before Mr. Borgin, and at the same time, the ring on the counter levitated and slowly floated into Guan Qiong's pocket. He chose the ring. "A wise choice," Mr. Borgin smiled, delighted. He'd had it for a long time. He'd been wanting to throw it away, but he felt it was valuable and a waste. And if he sold it, no one would buy it. Now that he had sold a ring for the equivalent of 12 galleons, he was naturally delighted. "In that case, it's a pleasure working with you." Mr. Borgin turned and lifted the wooden figure from the counter. The figure struggled, but couldn't escape Borgin's grasp. "It's a pleasure working with you," Guan Qiong nodded, a smile on his face, immensely satisfied. "I need to be off for a bit, the buyer's waiting for me," Mr. Borgin explained, walking briskly out. After 2 profitable sales, he felt like going to the Leaky Cauldron tonight for a few gin and gins, reminiscing about his youth. "Oh, by the way, I wish you a happy Hogwarts life," Mr. Borgin said suddenly, turning back to Guan Qiong before leaving the shop and heading back in the direction they had come from. Guan Qiong watched Mr. Borgin leave, a glint in his eyes. The ring was indeed badly damaged, and he wasn't entirely sure he could repair it, but he chose it anyway. The reason was simple. The ring floated out of Guan Qiong's pocket and hovered in front of him. Guan Qiong observed the ring's magic circuit with interest. It looked like he had never seen such a green magic circuit before. Elsewhere, Harry, hearing the noise outside fade away, waited a moment longer before gently knocking on the cabinet door. A bang. Guan Qiong, upon hearing the sound, remembered Harry was nearby. Putting the ring back into her pocket, Guan Qiong waved, opening the cabinet door and letting Harry out. "Qiong, what's going on? Where is this place? Why is Malfoy here? Who was that person just now?" Harry had so many questions that he almost forgot anyone was waiting for him. "We'll talk on the way." Guan Qiong tapped Boss Tom's wand on Harry's clothes, transforming it into a black cloak with a hood. Then, she tapped her own clothes. Their faces and bodies were completely obscured, making no visible information from the outside. "Come with me, I'll take you out first." The light hovered in front of Harry's glasses, emitting a fluorescent white glow. "Okay," Harry nodded. Guan Qiong cast another presence removal charm to remove the two's presence, then led Harry out of the shop. Harry followed Guan Qiong, looking around in wonder. The place was incredibly filthy. He couldn't believe so many shops could exist in such a dingy alleyway, but looking at the items inside, he felt it was perfectly normal. The shops were filled with either human heads or giant, black spiders. Others contained glass bottles of dark green liquid, swirling with twisted, grotesque flesh, making him nearly vomit. From time to time, they encountered wizards in strange attire and terrifying faces, their eyes gleaming with a chilling light, like demons lurking on Earth. "Where the hell is this?" Harry couldn't help but ask. "Nocturne Alley, the magical black market." "Don't ask any more questions, let's talk about it once we get out." A light appeared in front of Harry. Guan Qiong didn't turn back, but led the way. Whether it was due to his own emotions or the surroundings, Harry felt Guan Qiong's handwriting become dark and eerie, like twisted, tangled insects. As for Guan Qiong, she had become terrifying in his presence for no apparent reason. "Where are we going? Where are you taking me?" Harry couldn't help but ask loudly. The route ahead was winding, and the shops around him were dwindling. A cold aura enveloped him from all sides, and he suspected he was heading down a path of no return. Chapter 91 The Interesting Mr. Weasley. Guan Qiong stopped and turned to look at Harry. Harry took a fearful step back, watching Guan Qiong nervously. It was so strange. Why would Guan Qiong be here? He'd clearly said he was working as a bartender at the Leaky Cauldron during the summer. Had he been lying to them all? His guard was now up. Guan Qiong looked at Harry and smiled. They were already outside of Nocturne Alley, so there was no need to be so nervous. He paused the presence removal charm and changed their clothes back to their original state. Looking at the still nervous Harry, a point of light appeared. "Diagon Alley is just up ahead, just a few more steps." "Do you want to stay here?" Harry was skeptical, but Guan Qiong had already turned and walked forward. After a moment's thought, Harry followed. Sure enough, after turning a corner, the road ahead suddenly opened up, and Harry could see the familiar white marble building in the distance. Gringotts Bank. Last year, he and Hagrid had gone there and seen the large inheritance left to him by his parents. Hagrid had helped Dumbledore retrieve the Philosopher's Stone and place it in the school. Harry felt relieved, and ashamed of his earlier suspicion of Gwen. He took 2 steps forward, approaching Gwen's side, blushing, and said, "I'm sorry, Gwen, I shouldn't have doubted you." "Nothing, it's good to be cautious. There are a lot of bad people out there," Gwen said unconcernedly. "By the way, Gwen, why were you there?" Harry asked again. He had just left when he saw the name of the shop, Borgin and Burke's, and it didn't sound like a good place. "To make money, of course," Gwen shrugged. He had no inheritance. Suddenly remembering something, he turned to look at Harry. "By the way, Harry, I hope you won't tell anyone about this, not even Ron and Hermione, okay?" He wanted to keep it to Hermione, or else the little girl would start nagging again. While her nagging was sometimes amusing, it was also a bit annoying at times. "But that place is terrible. You should have gone there," Harry said, trying to persuade Gwen. If he couldn't persuade her, then he would have to tell Hermione about it and let her speak. Guan Qiong was their friend, and he couldn't bear to see him make a mistake. "I won't go there again. Today's the last time," Guan Qiong promised. "Really?" Harry looked at Guan Qiong, who nodded seriously. "All right, I believe you." Harry looked at Guan Qiong and reluctantly nodded. "Don't tell anyone. This is a secret between the two of us," Guan Qiong added. Harry's expression grew more serious at the word secret, like a knight guarding a gem. Guan Qiong laughed. Sure enough, children of that age were most concerned with secrets. The two quickly entered Diagon Alley and headed towards Gringotts. On the way, Guan Qiong bought 5 ice creams, giving one to Harry and leaving the other 3 floating around him. Hermione and Ron stood in front of Gringotts, along with Hagrid. He towered over the others and tilted his head, scanning his surroundings as if searching for something. As Guan Qiong and Harry approached, Hagrid spotted them and waved excitedly. Here, Harry, I finally found you. What a lucky guy." "Oh, Joan, are you here too? Where did you get from?" Hagrid called out. I saw Harry outside Nocturne Alley and brought him here." Guan Qiong flashed her light just in time to help Harry out. "Yeah, well, here's what happened. I came out of the fireplace and there was no one outside. So, I happened to run into Joan while running around," Harry said, blushing slightly. He didn't want to lie, but he kept his mouth shut. "Oh, my goodness, Harry, you went to Nocturne Alley. That's something special." Ron was nervous yet excited, his eyes sparkling, and he couldn't wait to ask Harry what Nocturne Alley was like. "Here, ice cream for you guys." Guan Qiong shared the ice cream between Ron and Hermione. Hagrid also got one, but he devoured it in one gulp. "Just find Harry. I just ran into Mrs. Weasley. They were so worried. Hermione said you'd probably go to the most obvious place around here when you got out, so I came looking for you here, and sure enough, I found you," Hagrid said. "It's nothing. Just a little empathy." Hermione lifted her nose slightly, glancing at Gwen. "Excellent," Gwen offered a timely compliment. Hermione's nose lifted even higher, and so did the corners of her mouth. Meanwhile, the wheel eyes began to crowd in from the surrounding area. Hagrid had just spotted them and gestured to them, telling them that Harry had been found. "Harry, that's great. You're all right. Looks like you just missed a furnace door." "A blessing in disguise," Mr. Weasley panted, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He was a tall, thin man with a slightly balding head, the rest of his hair the same red as the children's. He was also from the Ministry of Magic's Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office, searching other magical families for contraband. It was because of him that the Malfoys were thinking of selling some of their belongings at Borgin and Burke's. "Molly's freaking out. She'll be right here. By the way, where did you come from?" Harry repeated his words. He had strayed into an empty room in Nocturne Alley, wandered out, and encountered Gwen, who then led him over. "It's a blessing you didn't go further inside," said Mr. Weasley. "That's great. It's Nocturne Alley," George and Fred said, their eyes shining like Ron's, staring at Harry. Then they were glared at by Mr. Weasley. "By the way, I have to thank you very much, Guan Qiong. If it weren't for you, I would be in trouble today." Mr. Weasley shook hands with Guan Qiong and said solemnly, "It's nothing." A point of light appeared, and Mr. Weasley looked at the illumination magic, and a flash of surprise crossed his face. He had heard Ron talk about Guan Qiong's way of communication before, but when he actually saw it, he still found it incredible. This kind of ingenious use of magic was actually thought up by a 13-year-old child. No wonder Dumbledore praised his talents so much. Guan Qiong looked at Mr. Weasley, and his eyes flashed. According to the original novel, Mr. Weasley, though his department managed magical props and prohibited wizards from adding magic to Muggle items, was actually a Muggle artifact enthusiast. He was deeply interested in Muggle creations and would magically modify them. Guan Qiong reached into his other pocket and felt something hard inside. He had just brought the thing out. Or perhaps, he had anticipated running into Mr. Weasley and had brought it out specifically. Chapter 92, The Minister of Magic's Ambition. That was the tape recorder Guan Qiong had bought earlier, used for practicing the restoration charm, but it seemed it could be used for other things as well. It just needed some magical modifications and some special effects. However, Guan Qiong didn't take it out. There were too many people around, and while she knew Mr. Weasley would be interested, she still had to be mindful of the impact. Some things can be done in private, but not publicly. Guan Qiong understood this principle. The last to arrive were Mrs. Weasley and Ginny, a plump, kind-looking woman, but now her face was filled with anxiety. "Harry, darling, where have you been? We've been looking for you the whole time. I was so worried we'd lost you and wouldn't be able to explain to your aunt and uncle." Mrs. Weasley was panting heavily, exhausted from running all the way here. "I don't think they would. If I were really missing, I think they'd be celebrating with champagne," Harry said nonchalantly. "Don't think that, Harry. They're your family after all. Even if they don't care about you, you still have so many friends," Mrs. Weasley said. She saw Hermione beside Harry and nodded kindly. Then she looked at Gwen beside her, her eyes filled with tenderness. "Oh, you must be that child. I heard Ron mention it. Your name is Gwen, right? I knitted you a sweater last year. I hope you like it, very much, Mom." "That sweater is the warmest thing I've ever worn," Gwen said, flashing a light. "Oh, is that so? That's wonderful. I wish Ron was as sensible and obedient as you. Those brothers always like to annoy me." Mrs. Weasley looked at Gwen's typing, her heart melting. What a strong child. He couldn't speak, yet he could come up with such a plan. He must have put a lot of effort into it. It was heartbreaking to hear Ron say that he was still an orphan and couldn't come to the burrow this year because he was working to earn a living. Ron is a very brave man, Gwen boasted, though he certainly wouldn't utter the word reckless that followed the word brave. Ron's ears flushed. All right, hurry up and get some money. We need to go shopping later. He waved his hands wildly, inserting himself between the two of them. If they kept talking, he felt like he'd find a hole to crawl into. You kid, Mrs. Weasley chided with a smile, but after checking the time, she nodded. Then we'll go in, kid. See you later. Mrs. Weasley led the family inside. Harry did the same. He needed to withdraw some money. Hermione followed suit. Her parents were still inside exchanging currency. She had just escaped on her own. Guan Qiong was left standing outside, waiting for them to come out. He had all his money on him. It wasn't enough to deposit in the bank. Guan Qiong touched the tape recorder and ring in his pocket, feeling that he had quite a lot to do today. He might run into Lockhart later. He was probably doing a book signing at Flourish and Blots. That was great. The thought of Lockhart making so much money made Guan Qiong feel happy, like a vanilla pudding. After a while, the group emerged and separated outside the bank, agreeing to go to Flourish and Blots to buy books in an hour. Percy was going to buy a new quill. His own had become tattered from writing so many letters during the summer vacation. Fred and George saw their Hogwarts friend Lee Jordan and decided to go shopping together. Mrs. Weasley was taking Ginny to a shop selling used wizard robes, while Mr. Weasley invited the Grangers to the Leaky Cauldron for a drink. He'd heard they had some new drinks that were very popular, but he hadn't had a chance to try them yet. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Giancarlo began a pleasant stroll through Diagon Alley. They exchanged stories about their summer vacations, sharing them all in their letters, but they still enjoyed the conversation. Hearing about the Dursleys' mistreatment of Harry had infuriated all three, but they were amazed to hear Giancarlo had mixed 4 new cocktails at the Leaky Cauldron. It's a shame we can't drink yet, or we'd really like to try them, Ron said regretfully. We'll have a chance, Giancarlo flashed a light. Hermione, on the other hand, threw them a bunch of words they didn't understand, like the collapse of the Soviet Union and the changing world. She'd been focusing on Muggle history this summer, probably hoping to outdo Gwen in that area. But what does this have to do with us? Ron said, puzzled. Why not? Muggles may not know we exist, but we live in the same world. If Muggles go to war, our lives will be ruined too, Hermione said. Ron couldn't understand, and Harry looked confused as well. Only Gwen nodded in understanding and gave Hermione an admiring look. It was surprising how much she'd grown up after just one summer apart. This kind of big-picture perspective wasn't something most adults possessed, and yet Hermione, at only 13, had actually considered this. Of course, due to her age and experience, she probably only had a rudimentary idea, not a deep one, but it was already beyond most of her peers. Let the Ministry of Magic take care of things like that, Ron said nonchalantly. He came from a purely wizarding family, and his knowledge of the Muggle world came only from the fun toys his father brought home. HMPH, Hermione snorted, refusing to continue the conversation with Harry and Ron, the two brainless idiots. However, she turned to look at Guan Qiong, eager to gauge his reaction. These matters are indeed the responsibility of the Ministry of Magic, the first words emerged from Guan Qiong's hand. Hermione's eyes widened, staring at Guan Qiong in disbelief. But Hermione's so smart, she'll definitely join the ministry someday, maybe even become minister. Thinking about these things ahead of time is essential, Guan Qiong nodded confidently. Hermione's ears flushed. She looked at Guan Qiong and turned away. I'm still a long way from being Minister of Magic. I still have a lot to learn. If Hermione becomes Minister of Magic, then we won't have to take exams anymore. We can just get our diplomas straight away, with straight A's, Ron said to Harry. Harry's eyes brightened, and he looked at Hermione expectantly. Don't even think about it, you two. If I were Minister of Magic, I'd make you repeat each year until you graduate with A's in all your subjects, Hermione said, her hands on her hips. While playing and fighting, the four of them arrived in front of Flourish and Blots bookstore. Chapter 93 Lockhart's Strange Life Circuit. A large crowd had already formed outside Flourish and Blots, all pushing to get inside. Of the four, only Guan Qiong possessed a bit of strength. The other three, with the strength of ordinary children, couldn't squeeze in. A large banner hung in the second-floor window. Gilderoy Lockhart's autobiography, The Magical Me, will be signed and sold today from 12:30 to 16:30. Ah, it's Lockhart. We can actually meet him in person, the future Minister of Magic, Miss Granger, screamed upon seeing the banner. Harry and Ron, standing nearby, covered their ears, their faces contorted. It was too loud. I don't think the Minister of Magic is a fan of celebrities, Ron muttered. Me too, Harry agreed. He was about to turn around to ask Guan Qiong's opinion when he saw that Guan Qiong had already started lining up, with Hermione following beside him, incredibly excited. Oh my goodness, June, do you like Lockhart too? Harry exclaimed in amazement as Ron and Harry hurried over to stand beside them. Of course. You know, all the books for this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts class are Lockhart's. He has such a legendary background, and he's also kind and brave. Isn't it normal to like him? Hermione said quickly, her excitement mirroring that of everyone around her. Guan Qiong was much calmer. She looked at the long line ahead and nodded. I'm just curious about him. Harry and Ron exchanged a glance, feeling that everyone else was crazy, and only they were normal. A sense of loneliness welled up in their hearts. John, you have to admit, curiosity about someone is the beginning of liking them. You may not have read many of Lockhart's books yet, but it doesn't matter. Once you start, you'll finish them quickly because they're so wonderful and captivating. I recommend starting with Sailing with Vampires. This book is the beginning of Lockhart's journey, Hermione said to Guan Qiong, her eyes shining. Guan Qiong smiled without explanation, and had no thoughts about Hermione's current state. Although she would become the future Minister of Magic, she was still too young and easily influenced. Only through repeated setbacks would she mature rapidly. Lockhart was a prime example. By the end of her second year, he had taught her not to trust authority figures, no matter how prestigious they might be. His curiosity about Lockhart wasn't necessarily due to personal attraction. If there was any attraction, it was simply due to his galleons. The line was long, but after a while, they finally saw Lockhart. He was a master at presenting himself. He wore a blue robe that, like his blue eyes, evoked a vast ocean. A pointed wizard's hat graced his wavy blonde hair. Surrounding him were large photos of him from various angles, winking at the crowd, his white teeth bared. Combined with his youthful and handsome appearance, it was no wonder he captivated so many people, primarily middle-aged women. Guan Qiong stared intently at Lockhart, her eyes gleaming, like everyone else's. It was truly fascinating. Guan Qiong said to himself. After turning on his magical vision, he saw Lockhart's body shrouded in a vast array of magical circuits. His pockets, collar, and cuffs clearly held magical items. Then there were Lockhart's life circuits. Guan Qiong saw that they were somewhat different from those of others. While still roughly humanoid, they were curved in various places, like a unique symbol. Or, rather, like a magical circuit. Guan Qiong had seen this before in someone else. Seamus Finnegan, or the Explosive Kid, as they privately called him, was a young wizard whose spells would always result in explosions. Guan Qiong had observed his life circuits before, and like Lockhart's, Seamus's were warped in various places, like a unique symbol, or perhaps a magical circuit. Guan Qiong speculated that Seamus's body likely contained a circuit pattern similar to the explosion charm. Therefore, whenever he cast magic, his own internal magical circuits would be activated first, causing other objects to explode. This was his natural talent, though it was currently causing him considerable trouble. As for Lockhart, Guan Qiong narrowed his eyes. If his guess was correct, this circuit pattern must be the Obliviate Charm. As far as he knew, Lockhart was a master at the Obliviate Charm, otherwise so many experienced wizards wouldn't have fallen for it. But was this innate, or had his diligent practice of the Obliviate Charm affected his body, causing it to change? Guan Qiong pondered, but couldn't come up with an answer. He only knew this, by studying and practicing the circuit pattern within Lockhart's body, he would definitely be able to quickly master the Obliviate Charm. Of course, there might be other benefits as well. That was truly remarkable. Guan Qiong looked at Lockhart on the stage, feeling that he was a treasure, a truly wonderful person. No wonder so many people liked him. At that moment, Lockhart, sitting behind the desk, felt a chill on his back, as if something dangerous was staring at him. He looked up, a look of confusion on his face, but soon a smile broke out, his teeth flashing. Look, isn't that our savior, Harry Potter? Lockhart jumped up and walked towards Guan Qiong. He clearly had a personal record of famous people, as Harry's forehead was hidden by his hair, and the lightning scar was invisible. But Lockhart recognized Harry immediately. The crowd made way for him, and Lockhart rushed in front of the four people. Without a word, he grabbed Harry's arm and dragged him to the front. The crowd erupted in applause, and a reporter from the Daily Prophet nearby began to take pictures of this historic moment. "Be natural, Harry, this photo will be on the front page," Lockhart whispered beside Harry, who was puzzled as to how he could maintain a toothy smile and still speak. He felt his hand being pulled very tightly, and his face burning, as if he had a fever. He didn't even dare look at Ron and the others, because he felt he must look very stupid. Like a rare wild animal on display. But Lockhart felt good, he had never felt better before. He turned his face and gave everyone his most perfect expression. But when he saw Guan Qiong, he blinked, as if remembering something. "Is today my lucky day?" he whispered to himself, letting go of Harry's hand. Recommended book. A group friend has a book about exotic beasts that collects 12 spells. If you are interested, you can take a look. Chapter 94, Lockhart and Lavar's Connection. "Oh my god, oh my god," Lockhart shouted as he rushed into the crowd again. The people around him made way, not knowing who he saw again. Hermione looked at Lockhart walking towards her with excitement in her eyes, but Lockhart walked directly to Guan Qiong. "Isn't this the mute that Hogwarts recruited last year? I mean, the aphasic. I remember your name is Guan Qiong, right?" Lockhart pulled Guan Qiong with a frivolous smile. Guan Qiong wanted to refuse, but his eyes flashed and he didn't move, letting Lockhart pull him to the front. Harry was about to leave, but was pulled back by Lockhart halfway. The two stood on Lockhart's left and right, like attendants and supporting roles. But this was exactly the effect Lockhart wanted. "Oh, everyone, I have to say, today is truly a magnificent day. Not only is Harry here, but Guan Qiong is too. I'm sure most of you have heard of him. A year ago, Dumbledore publicly declared him incredibly gifted and admitted him to Hogwarts." Lockhart introduced him, drawing everyone's attention. A reporter nearby took the opportunity to raise his large black camera, eager to capture the scene. Flashes blazed brightly, and the camera puffed out purple smoke, but the reporter looked up in confusion, looking at the three people in front of him, then back at his camera. He captured nothing, only a blank white. To be honest, I'm sure the professors at the school are stumped on how to teach magic to someone who has lost their voice. I happen to have experience in this area. Back in Africa, I taught some children how to cast spells silently, but it was such a minor incident that I didn't include it in my writing. Lockhart went to the crowd, causing another uproar. "Happily, I've received a letter from Dumbledore inviting me to teach defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts this year, that is." Lockhart put his arms around Gwen and Harry's shoulders, a broad smile on his face. "I'll be their teacher this year." The reporter snapped another picture, but after a moment, he put the camera down again and fiddled with it, as if something was wrong with it. The others applauded, and Lockhart's smile widened until 8 dazzling white teeth were visible. "So, did you take my picture? I guarantee it'll be on the cover of the Daily Prophet. After all, I've won the Witch Weekly Most Attractive Smile Award 5 times. Of course, I don't like to talk about that, it's just one of my many strengths," Lockhart said to the reporter. The reporter wiped the sweat from his forehead and said to Lockhart, "I'm very sorry, sir. I don't know what's wrong with the camera. It won't take any pictures. It's all white, including the last 2 pictures." Lockhart's expression changed slightly. "That's right," the reporter nodded. "That won't do," Lockhart exclaimed, his expression slightly off, but as he looked at the people around him, he regained his smile. "I mean, if they don't get a photo with my signature, they'll be so upset they'll cry their eyes out tonight." Okay, let me see what's wrong. I hate to talk about it, but I'm actually quite good at fixing these things. After all, when you travel, you're bound to run into problems." Lockhart released the 2 men, took out his wand, and stepped forward. Harry exhaled loudly. "Let's go," he whispered urgently to Guan Qiong. Guan Qiong brushed the wrinkles off his shoulders and shook his head. His dark eyes had been clouded with a silvery light, and he was now staring intently at Lockhart. He had observed and recorded Seamus's spellcasting, and he was certain that the mutation in Seamus's life circuits was innate, a gift. Lockhart, on the other hand, wanted to see whether it was natural or acquired. That's why he hadn't resisted Lockhart's pull. Harry wasn't as weak as he was, and he couldn't resist Lockhart's hand. Lockhart took out his wand, waved it at the reporter's camera, and then chanted a spell. "Restore, sir, I just tried this spell," the reporter reminded him. "This spell is the first reaction of all wizards when they encounter something broken, just like Muggles' first reaction to a broken object is to pat it. That's yours, but mine is different. I once used the repairing charm to repair an entire cruise ship in the Panama Canal. You have to trust my skills," Lockhart said confidently. The repairing charm fell on the camera, but there was no reaction. The people around him looked at him in confusion. "This is how a masterful repairing charm works. Try it." "It's definitely fixed," Lockhart said with an unwavering expression. The reporter half-believedly picked up the camera and tried to take a picture of Lockhart. Lockhart instantly flashed his perfect, standard smile. But the reporter helplessly put the camera down and shook his head at Lockhart. "I'm sorry, sir, it's the same old story. It's all white. How is that possible? There's probably something wrong with your method. You guys at the Daily Prophet always make mistakes like this. Last time, you even put my story in the corner," Lockhart questioned. He snatched the camera away and waved his wand wildly, casting repairing charms and other spells of unknown effectiveness. Behind him, Guan Qiong laughed. "Let's go." After a moment, he projected a light and beckoned Harry to leave. He had observed what he wanted and achieved the desired result. When Lockhart used magic, the life circuits in his body changed completely from Seamus's. When Seamus used magic, his life circuits acted like a seal, imprinting directly onto the incoming magic power, transforming them into the same magic circuits, which were then channeled through the spell. However, Lockhart's life circuits collided with his own magic power, weakening or even dissipating the effects of his intended magic. It was like two overlapping magic circuits interfering with each other. Therefore, it can be determined that Lockhart's life circuit mutation was acquired. Perhaps his repeated practice of the Oblivion Charm and his deep understanding of its use caused the magical circuits of the Oblivion Charm to affect his life circuits. This made his Oblivion Charm extremely effective, but weakened the effects of other spells. After understanding this, Guan Qiong's face broke into a bright smile. He finally figured out the Avenger Laval's flame. Chapter 95. You always have to pay for broken things. After Gwen and Harry left, Lockhart was finally able to use the camera normally. However, when he looked up, they were nowhere to be seen. "Why are we leaving so fast? I haven't even asked Lockhart for his autograph yet," Hermione said unwillingly. It was a shame that Harry and Gwen hadn't asked Lockhart to leave his autograph despite such a good opportunity. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future. "Didn't you hear him say he'll be teaching defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts?" Ron said nonchalantly. "Then he'll definitely be the best defense against the dark arts professor ever," Hermione said excitedly. "The most famous," Gwen smiled. Hermione thought she was agreeing with her, and the smile on her face became even more pronounced. "At least better than Quirrell," Harry consoled himself. He felt his fingers go numb. Lockhart had gripped his hand too hard. The four of them edged around the thick crowd surrounding Lockhart and struggled to squeeze into Flourish and Blots. Mrs. Weasley was already there with Ginny, sorting through a pile of second-hand books, selecting the ones that weren't too dirty or tattered. Ginny's face was as red as her hair, and she clutched the hem of Mrs. Weasley's shirt tightly, not daring to look up. "Oh, you're here. I just heard some noise up ahead, and was just planning to go over after I bought some books," Mrs. Weasley said. She looked at Harry and Gwen with a hint of regret on her face. "Why didn't you ask Lockhart for his autograph, Mom?" Ron blushed as well, pushing Mrs. Weasley to go buy books together. Okay, I'm just saying, this is such a shame, isn't it? That's Lockhart's autograph," Mrs. Weasley sighed. Mrs. Weasley was also fascinated by Lockhart. "I saw quite a few of his books at the Burrow," Harry explained to Gwen and Hermione. "She's such a classy lady," Hermione nodded. Guan Qiong made no comment and headed inside. He only needed a copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Level 2 to finish his school books. He'd already bought a set of Lockhart's books and read them all. It was easy to be captivated by Lockhart's writing, as if you were a novel. Flourish and Blots looked small from the outside, but it was quite large inside, resembling a small library. Rows of shelves held a wide variety of books, making Guan Qiong briefly believe he was back in the school library. He found the spot where the Standard Book of Spells, Level 2 was placed. With a light tap of his right hand, 3 books floated out, hovering beside him. Ron, who had a second-hand copy left by his brothers, and Harry and Hermione, both needed one, had asked him to bring one out. They, on their part, were looking for Lockhart's books. As Guan Qiong left, he heard a sudden commotion and screaming outside, along with the sound of bookshelves being knocked over. Guan Qiong took 2 steps back, avoiding the books that were thrown at him. Looking forward, he saw the 2 people fighting at the bookstore entrance had been separated by a tall figure. It was Hagrid, and the 2 fighting were Lucius and Mr. Weasley. They had always been at odds, both over their attitudes toward Muggles and their work at the Ministry. It was clear they had little experience in fighting, they were simply pushing and shoving each other. Their injuries were merely a few blows from books, leaving them with varying degrees of bruises. Lucius's injuries were more serious, as the books that had hit him were thicker and larger, often as thick as 2 city wall bricks. The situation around them was much worse. Many bookshelves had been smashed, and the books on them had fallen to the ground, leaving footprints on them. The once pristine books had become worn and grimy, their value plummeting. Some were even rotten, pages flying everywhere. "Hold on to your books, little girl. They're the best your father could give you," Lucius said venomously, thrusting his battered Transfiguration textbook into Ginny's hands. He wriggled free of Hagrid's arm and gestured for Malfoy to leave the shop. Ginny clutched the book, her head bowed, lost in thought. Guan Qiong also gazed at the book. If he remembered correctly, Voldemort's notebook, a key tool for the 2nd year, was tucked in the middle. It was one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, containing memories of his 16th year, capable of confusing people, opening the Chamber of Secrets, and controlling the basilisk. But Guan Qiong made no unnecessary moves, nor did he activate his magical vision to examine it. He was always cautious about matters related to Voldemort. As for obtaining it, studying the structure of the Horcruxes, and saving an ignorant little girl, he'd better wait until school, where Dumbledore was, making everything safer. Meanwhile, Hagrid pulled Mr. Weasley up and smoothed his robes. Thank you, Hagrid. If you hadn't come, I don't know what I would have done," said Mrs. Weasley, looking at the chaos around her and the shop assistants blocking the door, feeling a little overwhelmed. All of these things would have to be paid for, but they're money. But Guan Qiong helped her solve the problem. He opened his hands, and invisible magical energy surged from him, enveloping the entire store with a powerful, wide area repair spell. Everything around him began to flow back into place. The shattered bookshelves began to piece together and restore themselves. The surrounding books began to fly out and return to their original positions, their marks disappearing, leaving them as good as new. In just a moment, the entire Flourish and Blotch bookstore was restored to its original state, without a single difference. "Oh my God," the clerk muttered to himself, watching the astonishing scene. His repair spell could only repair a broken teacup. Could a human really use a repair spell of that level? And he was a young wizard, only about 14 or 15 years old. "Oh, thank you so much, kid, you've solved a big problem for us," Mrs. Weasley said excitedly, her mood softening and her nervousness subsiding. "Cool," Fred and George said in unison. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stared at Guan Qiong in amazement, their mouths open, unsure of what to say. Ginny also looked up, surprised, at Gwen. She had just thought about the compensation issue, and she felt deeply saddened, as she had caused this whole thing. The Grangers, who had also arrived, watched with their mouths dropped open, then suddenly turned to look at Hermione. "I can't do that yet," Hermione whispered, blushing. "Thank you so much, Gwen, thank you so much." Mr. Weasley squeezed Gwen's hand, shaking it vigorously. He had indeed acted impulsively, without considering the consequences. He had been planning to write an IOU to the Ministry of Magic and then slowly compensate the bookstore for its losses. But Gwen hadn't expected Gwen to restore everything so quickly. This restorative spell was truly powerful. "It's nothing," a light appeared between Mr. Weasley and Gwen. "Also, I need your help with something." Another stream of light appeared, but it was so dim that only Mr. Weasley, standing in front of Gwen, could see it clearly. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96: The Mysterious Disappearance. Things went smoothly. Mr. Weasley's eyes lit up when he saw the tape recorder that Gwen presented. Then, when Gwen explained that he only wanted to add a fixed-point radio function, he immediately agreed. The request wasn't difficult, and it was a piece of cake for him. He was undoubtedly the most experienced in magically modifying human artifacts. The day passed quickly. Back at the Leaky Cauldron, Gwen presented Mr. Weasley and the Grangers with 2 bottles of her own blend, gingerbread and Lafferty, respectively, tailored to their needs. They happily accepted and invited Gwen to visit them when she had time. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, 4 days had passed, and it was the first day of school. Gwen arrived at King's Cross Station at 10:45, punctually, and met the Wheel-Eyes between platforms 9 and 10. They had just arrived, but judging by their tired expressions, they must have been up since 6 in the morning. What a coincidence, Guan Qiong. I didn't expect to see you. I thought you'd already arrived at the station, and was just about to have Ron and Harry bring this thing to you at school. Mr. Weasley greeted Guan Qiong warmly upon seeing her. He then took out a tape recorder and handed it to her. Guan Qiong took it, but it didn't produce any light. Since he was outside and couldn't use magic, he simply smiled and nodded to Mr. Weasley in gratitude. It's nothing, just a magical thing. It took me a while to disassemble it and understand the internals, but I've seen a lot of new things, Mr. Weasley said to Guan Qiong with a smile. Guan Qiong examined the tape recorder in her hand, taking in the intricate magical circuitry of its various components and grinning. It seemed to have some added features like waterproofing, automatic charging, and other features. Guan Qiong was very satisfied, and a happy smile spread across her face. This might not have been difficult for Mr. Weasley, but it was a great help to Guan Qiong. With this thought, Guan Qiong glanced around, but his magical vision revealed nothing. Inadvertently, he'd bumped into Ron, pushing him forward. "Oh, Qiong, you stepped on my foot," Ron cried out, but Guan Qiong simply stared at him. "Well, it's nothing. Did you see someone you know?" Guan Qiong shook his head. Time was running out, and Mrs. Weasley arranged the order of entry. "Harry, Ron, you go in together. We need to hurry. Time is running out," she said, gazing at the wall clock. The two nodded, pushing the small luggage cart together, and rushed towards the dividing wall between platforms 9 and 10. They disappeared into the wall, as if swallowed by the force, but the other pedestrians around them didn't even notice, as if nothing had happened. "Next is Percy, and you, my dear sir, could you please hurry?" Mrs. Weasley urged. Mr. Weasley and Percy also vanished through the partition, followed by Gwen, then Mrs. Weasley and Ginny, with Fred and George trailing behind. Gwen swiftly passed through the partition, like a curtain being drawn back. When his eyes flashed, he was already at platform 9, 3/4. A crimson steam locomotive was parked beside the platform, humming and urging students who hadn't yet boarded to hurry. The train was about to depart. But the Wheel-Eyes remained huddled together, making no move to board. If nothing went wrong, it must have been an accident. Gwen sighed and glanced at the partition behind him. Fred and George had also emerged. The magical circuitry was incredibly complex, beyond Gwen's current understanding, so he hadn't previously noticed if there was a problem. As he reached the Wheel-Eyes, Harry and Ron were not among them. Mrs. Weasley and Mr. Weasley were anxiously looking around. Meanwhile, Percy disembarked from the train and shook his head. "Oh my goodness. I just told them to wait here. Where have they gone?" Mrs. Weasley said anxiously, watching Fred and George hurry up behind her, hoping for good news. For example, they'd backpedaled again. "No, Mum, we didn't see them. We were the last to come in," Fred said, and George nodded. Just then, the train whistled again, urging the young wizards who hadn't yet boarded to hurry up. "We're running out of time, children. You should all get on board first. Arthur and I will go ask the platform staff if Harry and Ron are okay. They must have accidentally gotten somewhere else," Mrs. Weasley said. "Keep an eye on your brother and sister, and don't get naughty. Ginny, remember to stay with your brothers," Mr. Weasley said with final words. "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on them," Percy said sternly. Fred and George didn't laugh at this point, just nodded. Ron's absence worried them. Although they always teased him, he was still their younger brother. Ginny nodded silently, trailing behind the others like a shadow. Several people began to board the train, while Mrs. Weasley and Mr. Weasley anxiously ran toward the staff. Although Guan Qiong knew what was going on, he couldn't say anything at this point. Furthermore, the previous incident had made it clear that he couldn't intervene further. He had clearly let Harry and Ron in first and watched them disappear, but they still hadn't made it to the station. It was clear that house elves' magic was truly unique. However, Guan Qiong was certain that Dobby wouldn't harm Harry and Ron, so he wasn't overly concerned. Once on the train, the Wheel Eyes found a compartment and sat down, while Guan Qiong walked forward, trying to find an empty compartment. Hopefully Hermione has saved him a seat like she did at the library, Guan Qiong thought, moving forward while observing the next compartment. His suitcase trailed behind him, like a footless ghost. Just as Guan Qiong passed another compartment, a voice called out to him. "Guan Qiong," the voice said, surprised and surprised, like meeting a long-lost friend. But Guan Qiong was certain that he had never heard this voice before, whether in his past life or this life. Guan Qiong turned around and saw a girl a little younger than him, with long golden hair that reached down to his waist. Her light silver eyes curved into crescents, staring straight at him. This seemed to be Luna. "Hello, Guan Qiong," Luna greeted warmly and pointed to the place in front of her. "There's no one here." Chapter 97 Genius? Harry sensed something was amiss. Pitch blackness surrounded him. This wasn't the expected 9-3/4 station at all, it was like being transported to another dimension. He tried to shout, but no sound came out. Then, he saw a bright light ahead and hurried forward. The small luggage cart rushed out with him, crashing to the ground. Hedwig screamed angrily, startled by the fall. Behind Harry, Ron rushed out as well, nearly falling on top of him. "What's going on?" Ron groaned, rubbing his head, which was already red. "Not sure." Harry stood up, lifted the luggage cart, and comforted Hedwig. Only then did he realize what was happening around him. They were back between platforms 9 and 10 at King's Cross Station, surrounded by people staring at them in confusion. "Damn it. We can't get in. We're going to miss our train," Ron said anxiously, standing up and pushing against the partition. "What do we do?" Harry asked frantically. He had never encountered such a situation before. Ron frowned, his fists clenching and unclenching. Suddenly, he thought of the car they'd ridden in. It was one his father had modified, infused with countless magic, and most importantly, it could fly. "I've got an idea," Ron exclaimed, his eyes brightening. Harry had a bad feeling. Guan Qiong stared out the window at the fields as the train pulled away, heading for Hogwarts. Across from him sat Luna Lovegood, a well-known character in the books, a year younger than Harry and the others, though she didn't appear in a scene until their 5th year. He had no idea what happened after that. He only clearly remembered the first 3 Harry Potter films, and his knowledge of the rest was fragmentary, relying mainly on online film clips. He only knew Luna because of the viral clips of her on various video platforms. This had instilled in Guan Qiong a deep interest in her, leading him to learn more about her than about the other characters. For example, Luna was an eccentric girl, known as the Mad Girl, and her father was the editor of the magazine The Quibbler. And then, nothing more was known. However, Luna didn't look at the Quibbler. Instead, she rummaged through her suitcase and pulled out a thick black notebook. "Look, there you are," Luna said, flipping to the middle page and pointing. Guan Qiong tilted her head, looking at the notebook. Pasted on top was a fragment of a newspaper, clearly carefully cut, with perfectly neat edges and the content still intact. "This year, I had the fortunate and unfortunate news that Hogwarts, Britain's premier wizarding school, had admitted not only the savior Harry Potter but also another special student. Guan Qiong, a child of Eastern descent, an orphan from an orphanage, a mute, would be attending Hogwarts this year, and Dumbledore had recognized him as the most gifted student. All hope of saving the future rested on him. I can't help but wonder, what's going on? When did a mute become able to learn magic? Has the education level at Hogwarts become so advanced that spells aren't necessary for learning magic? Could a young wizard skip the normal process of casting spells and jump straight to silent spells? I'm deeply skeptical. From this, it's reasonable to infer that Hogwarts has become corrupted, no longer focused on educating its students, but instead recruiting exceptional students to boost their profile and reputation, thereby defrauding the Ministry of Magic of more educational funds. As for Dumbledore, perhaps he's truly old. Perhaps a comfortable chair in the courtyard is where he belongs, otherwise he wouldn't make such a lowly mistake. Of course, there's also the possibility that Guan Qiong is Dumbledore's illegitimate child, an Oriental bastard. Rita Skeeter reports for you. The report was published last summer, and the whole incident caused a stir in the wizarding world, but ultimately, under Dumbledore's authority, it was suppressed and brought to a close. Of course, some were secretly waiting, expecting Guan Qiong to criticize Hogwarts and Dumbledore after a year of studying without learning any magic. Instead, they were presented with Guan Qiong's perfect transcript. Of course, some questioned the authenticity of the transcript, questioning the fairness of Hogwarts education, but their voices were so quiet that few paid much attention. Guan Qiong returned the notebook to Luna, unsure of the significance of her actions. While the incident had indeed been quite famous, it didn't seem necessary to cut it out and preserve it. Furthermore, judging by the thickness of the notebook, it seemed she had glued a lot of other things together. Guan Qiong was eager to see what had stuck to it, but since it was her personal secret, she didn't open the other pages. What is this? A point of light appeared out of thin air, hovering between the two of them, forming a line of words. Luna's eyes reflected a glint of light, like stars in the night sky. Is this an illumination spell? Luna asked, staring at the point of light before her without answering Guan Qiong's question. She lifted her wand from behind her left ear and waved it gently. Lumis, she began in a sing-song voice, and a ball of blue light flew out from the tip of her wand, bathing the entire box in a pale blue glow. Lumis, she chanted this spell again, but this time there was no movement, no second ball of light. Lumis, Luna chanted again, and the previous ball of light extinguished, and the next one flew out of her wand. Luna seemed dissatisfied, shaking her wand violently, her brow furrowed, her silver eyes piercing with seriousness. Lumis, 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 she continued to chant, her words rapid and slurred, her sentences seemingly connected, sounding like a long lyric. Guan Qiong watched helplessly, her understanding of the crazy girl Luna deepened. He shouldn't have been sitting in this box. No wonder no one else had been there for so long. Watching Luna wave her wand like a band conductor, Guan Qiong sighed and was about to ask her to stop. But at that moment, a ball of blue light suddenly flew out from Luna's wand. Then came a second, a third, and a fourth. Like a bubble machine, it continuously sprayed blue light bubbles into the air. Soon, the entire compartment was enveloped in blue light. Guan Qiong stared at the blue light ball beside him, his eyes widening in surprise, staring at Luna before him. He had practiced the illumination charm diligently for a month to achieve this level before, and Luna, was she another once-in-a-millennium genius? Guan Qiong looked into Luna's silver-white eyes, uncertain. How interesting. At this moment, Luna, as if having had enough, put her wand on her ear. The light balls around her burst and disappeared like bubbles. She picked up the notebook on the table, flipped to the front, and began to read, ignoring Guan Qiong in the compartment. Enough, just doing whatever she wants, Guan Qiong said silently in his heart. Chapter 98 Four-Person Carriage. As the train moved along, Guan Qiong watched the scenery outside the window transform from green fields into purple swamp, then out of the swamp into one village after another. Due to the magic, the villagers couldn't see the train, nor could they hear the ever-increasing whistling sound. Luna buried her face in her thick notebook, like a child locked in a secret base. Guan Qiong thought she would travel quietly all the way to Hogwarts. But then, the door to the compartment opened. It was Hermione, dragging her suitcase in, staring at Guan Qiong with wide eyes. I saved a seat for you over there, but you never came to see me, Hermione said angrily. Guan Qiong scratched her head, not knowing how to respond. Then, Hermione noticed someone sitting across from her, a girl she had never seen before. At least, she didn't remember anyone she knew putting a wand to their ear. It didn't seem normal. Hermione looked at Guan Qiong in confusion. Guan Qiong pointed at Hermione's luggage, put it away, and then a light in her hand flew out in front of Hermione. A first-year student named Luna, Hermione asked, her voice tinged with confusion as she sat next to Guan Qiong. There was something a little strange about this new student. Oh, right, as if suddenly remembering something, Hermione turned and looked around, making sure there was no one else in the compartment. Where are Harry and Ron? I couldn't find them just now. Did you see them? They seemed to have run into some trouble and disappeared at the station. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley went to look for the station staff, Guan Qiong explained. Are you talking about Harry Potter? The boy who lived? Luna put down the notebook in front of her, revealing her face, and looked at Hermione and Guan Qiong. Yes, Hermione looked at Luna and extended her right hand kindly. Hello, I'm Hermione Granger, a second-year student at Hogwarts. Luna's eyes were dazed for a moment, and she tilted her head, extending her right hand as well. My name is Luna Lovegood, and I'm new here this year. Nice to meet you. Hermione nodded, her tone warm but not overly enthusiastic. "Nice to meet you too," Luna smiled, then held her notebook upright, shielding her face like a child returning home after sunset. Hermione looked at Guan Qiong in confusion. She felt that the girl's behavior didn't seem entirely logical. Guan Qiong shrugged, indicating that she couldn't understand it either. She was just as crazy as she was. Of course, she didn't see any problem with it. Everyone had their own way of living, as long as it didn't affect others. Okay, where were we? Oh, right, Harry and Ron, what trouble are they in? Hermione brought the subject back. Guan Qiong didn't know how to explain it. After a moment's thought, he extended his hand, and dots of light gathered in his palm, transforming into one dot of light figure after another. Then came the train station, and the appearance of platforms 9 and 10 was also reproduced. Hermione's eyes widened when she saw Harry and Ron pass the partition but didn't come out the other side or go back. "Are they missing?" she asked worriedly. "Yes, there must be a problem with the magic there, and they've been taken somewhere else. Don't worry, everything will be fine," Guan Qiong reassured Hermione. "Maybe they'll be waiting for us at the place where we got off the train when we get to school." Hermione was still a little worried, but Guan Qiong's reassurance relaxed her somewhat. At this moment, a plump witch pushed a cart through the aisle, hawking snacks and iced pumpkin juice, a refreshing drink. Guan Qiong waved her to stop, and then used a levitation spell to make the snacks pile up on the table. "Oh, June, that's too much," Hermione said, watching the flurry of BB-every flavor beans, puffball super bubble gum, chocolate frogs, and other random snacks fly before her. The witch, however, was all smiles, especially when Guan Jun pulled out a galleon. "That's not bad, I can take the extras to school and eat them later." Guan Jun sorted through the snacks before her, picking up a licorice wand and tossing it into her mouth. It was sweet and icy, perfect for summer vacation. Hermione said nothing more. She knew Guan Jun had made a lot of money during the summer vacation, so this kind of spending wasn't a big deal for him now. She picked up the iced pumpkin juice and drank it. It had to be said that in this weather, a cold drink was truly refreshing, and it made the stuffiness melt away. There were 2 more drinks on the table, one in front of Guan Jun and one in front of Luna. After the fat witch left with her cart, a red figure appeared from behind her, dragging a suitcase and looking around, as if searching for someone. "Ginny," Hermione was the first to notice the figure, exclaiming in surprise. Ginny turned, looked at the 3 people in the compartment, then at the snacks on the table, and swallowed. Her face flushed immediately, and she ducked, about to run away. "Ginny, wait a minute," Hermione moved quickly, standing up and grabbing Ginny's shoulders. She glanced up and down the aisles, seeing no one else. Then, looking at Ginny, who seemed bewildered, she asked with concern, "Where are your brothers? Why are you alone?" They met up with their classmates and ran off somewhere with them," Ginny whispered, keeping her head down, not daring to look at Hermione in front of her or at Guan Qiong in the compartment. "Fred and George are so irresponsible." "Where's Percy?" Hermione asked, frowning. "Percy disappeared as soon as he got on the train," Ginny said, a hint of grievance. "Oh, he must have gone to the prefect's compartment. He thought you were with Fred and George." Hermione was very clever and immediately understood the reason. "So what are you doing?" Hermione looked at Ginny dragging her luggage. "Other people have entered the compartment at the back, and I want to change places," Ginny said. The people who came later knew each other, and although they also tried to chat with her, she didn't understand what they were talking about at all, which made her feel useless and sad. Moreover, Ginny looked at her old robes. Those people were wearing new robes, brand new, just made this year, and hers were given to her by Ron because he couldn't wear them anymore. "Is that so?" Hermione looked at Ginny, who suddenly became sad, and hugged her. "Then come to our place, we just happen to have a place here," Hermione said, and seeing that Ginny was still hesitant, she directly and forcefully pulled her into the compartment. As for the luggage, Guan Qiong snapped her fingers, and they automatically flew to where they should go and were neatly placed. Chapter 99 Ginny sat next to Luna, feeling a little uneasy. She glanced at her out of the corner of her eye. Luna kept hiding her face behind her notebook, giving her the impression that she didn't appreciate her presence. She was also confused by the sight of Luna's wand tucked behind her ear. Was this the Hogwarts way of storing wands? Should she do the same? Would taking it out now make people think she was a fool for not even knowing this? Guan Qiong's movements interrupted her thoughts. He controlled the iced pumpkin juice in front of him and floated it towards Ginny. Thank you, I'm not thirsty. Ginny, though feeling thirsty, refused. But Guan Qiong suddenly removed the levitation spell, and the iced pumpkin juice fell directly. Ginny instinctively caught it. It was so cool. The coolness seemed to flow from her hand all the way to her heart, bringing her a sense of calm. I bought too many snacks. Help me eat some. Guan Qiong cast a light beam, levitating in front of Ginny, and simultaneously controlled various snacks to fly towards her. Thank you, Ginny whispered, gently sipping her pumpkin juice. It was so sweet. Even though it was cold, she felt her heart warm. Guan Qiong smiled, popped a chocolate frog into her mouth, and gazed out the window. As the youngest of the Weasley family, and the only girl, Ginny hadn't received much attention or care. After all, with 7 children in her family, the Weasleys placed a heavy burden on them. They were exhausted simply providing for their material needs, leaving them with little energy to focus on their mental well-being. As a girl, Ginny was naturally sensitive, making her more sensitive than her brothers to subtle details, such as family difficulties and the gap between her and others. This led to her feeling inferior and even hiding herself. Guan Qiong felt compassion for this little girl, and the Weasleys were kind to her, helping her rebuild a tape recorder and giving her a hand-knitted sweater for Christmas. That sweater was truly warm. So he didn't mind helping Ginny a little more, and making her happier within his ability. Just like now, Ginny cautiously reached out to take the snacks on the table, clumsily unwrapped them, and put them into her mouth. Then, her face lit up with happiness. Sweets have this effect. Although she blushed and lowered her head the next second, not daring to meet Guan Qiong's gaze. Ah, it's pumpkin juice. A vague voice suddenly came from the side, scaring Ginny. Luna bit the straw of the pumpkin juice, her face puffed up like a frog, and at the same time she stared at Ginny next to her. Hello, I'm Luna, Luna Lovegood, 1st grade, Luna said with blinking eyes. My name is Ginny, Ginny Weasley. Ginny introduced herself, paused, and added hurriedly. First year too. Silence fell between the two of them. Luna, like a clockwork puppet, ate 2 pieces of pumpkin pie and then buried herself in her notebook, making one wonder if there was a time limit on her time outside. Ginny was also stunned, somewhat bewildered. She looked at Hermione, who shrugged at her. Guan Qiong smiled and stared out the window. Was this a normal exchange? Ginny couldn't understand, but she didn't feel uncomfortable, nor did she think it was her fault as before. It was as if someone had lifted something that had been weighing on her, making her less nervous and sensitive. As time passed, the sky outside gradually darkened, and the plains gave way to mountains and trees. The train began to slow. We're almost at the station. Get ready, Hermione said to Ginny and Luna. Ginny nodded, and Luna looked up at the window. Guan Qiong waved his hand gently, and the snacks on the table flew into the air, gathering into a ball and flying into his suitcase. Of course, he also made 3 small piles and filled Ginny, Hermione, and Luna's pockets. Hermione smiled and said she couldn't eat that much candy, but she didn't refuse. Ginny bowed her head and said thank you. As for Luna, she probably didn't notice. She seemed to be lost in thought for half the time. The train slowed down until it stopped. Someone would take the suitcases to the school, and the 4 of them headed straight outside. The night air grew colder, and Gwen shuddered and tightened her clothes. First years, this way, Hagrid's loud voice came from above, reaching everyone's ears. Ginny and Luna looked up and instantly saw the source of the voice. Hagrid towered over the others, and beside him, the other young wizards looked like dwarfs. Gwen and Hermione waved to them and headed to the other side of the platform. They were second years, so they didn't have to take the boat trip to Black Lake. Hagrid also saw Gwen and Hermione, but he didn't have time to greet them. There were too many students on the scene, and it wasn't the best time to chat. He turned, but didn't see Harry and Ron. Confused, he rubbed his head, then, with a mixture of confusion and worry, led the first years away. Guan Qiong and Hermione arrived at a rough, muddy path. There were at least 100 carriages waiting for them, enough to carry all students from 2nd to 7th years to the Hogwarts Great Hall. Guan Qiong and Hermione climbed into one of the carriages and closed the door. The carriage began to move, but no living creature could be seen in front of it, as if it were moving on its own. Guan Qiong stared ahead. Unlike the others, he knew something about the carriages. There was something in front, but it was invisible to ordinary people. It was a magical creature called a thestral, visible only to those who had witnessed death. Guan Qiong was puzzled that he couldn't see the thestral, whether through ordinary or magical vision. This made him wonder if he had misremembered the information. Could it be that death in a previous life didn't count as death, or that the thestrals lacked magical power? Guan Qiong was puzzled. He had assumed he could observe the thestrals. He had even taken out his notebook, hoping to draw these magical creatures. But reality played a trick on him. Facing Hermione's puzzled gaze, Guan Qiong reluctantly put away his notebook and waited for the thestrals to pull them to their destination. After passing 2 imposing wrought iron gates and a long uphill drive, the carriage finally stopped. Hogwarts Castle had arrived. Second year had begun. Chapter 100 The Sorting Hat's Judgment of Guan Qiong. Passing through the majestic oak doors, Gwen and Hermione entered a vast, deep entrance hall. Torches blazed brightly along the stone walls, and the ceiling was so high that it was almost invisible. Turning right, they entered the magnificent Great Hall of Hogwarts. 4 long tables stood in it, one for each of the 4 houses. Above them, thousands of candles shone brightly, lingering in the air. Gwen and Hermione took their seats. The tables were set with gleaming golden plates and goblets, but there was no food. Dinner would not begin until the sorting ceremony was over and Dumbledore finished his speech. Honestly, Gwen and Hermione weren't particularly hungry, they had already eaten well on the train. Then, Professor McGonagall led the new students through the gates, placing them in the center, forming several rows. As she placed a worn, pointed wizard's hat on a 4-legged stool, some of the new students exclaimed in confusion. "Silence," Professor McGonagall said loudly. Her hair was tied in a tight bun, her expression was serious, and she wore square glasses, all of which made her look very dignified and untouchable. Everyone fell silent. Professor McGonagall took out a scroll of parchment and said to the freshmen, "Whoever's name I call, please come up, put on your hat, sit on the stool, and be sorted." The freshmen nervously stirred again, but Professor McGonagall had already started reading the first name. Guan Qiong looked at this familiar scene and recalled a year ago, when he had also been a freshman and was also wondering which house he would be admitted to. He didn't want Slytherin. It was too exclusive, and he had no family background. He didn't feel qualified for Ravenclaw, after all, he hadn't been a top student in his previous life. Gryffindor was worried about getting too close to the protagonists and getting involved in their affairs. He didn't want to get involved too much. After thinking it over, he actually felt that Hufflepuff was a good choice. Although he didn't remember much, it was stable and safe. Well, that's it. But when he put on the sorting hat, it said this, let me see. Oh, a vigilant child, don't worry. I can't see people's memories, only their thoughts. I judge their character from those thoughts. Let me see what you want to do. Oh, your exploration of magic, your desire for a new world, very good indeed, child. With such thoughts, you will go far on the path of magic. Let me think, where should I sort you into? Perhaps Ravenclaw is a good fit for you. You're a smart child and you love reading. I can see that. Oh, no, you read to explore more mysteries. Your thirst for knowledge isn't for knowledge itself, but for seeing more things. You pursue knowledge, but you only use it as a tool. If that's the case, perhaps you are more suitable, Gryffindor. As the sorting hat shouted, the red-haired girl took off the hat and ran to the Gryffindor table, while the Gryffindor students applauded. Guan Qiong joined in the applause, watching Ginny run to sit next to Fred and George. As expected, she was sorted into Gryffindor. At that moment, Guan Qiong noticed a cold gaze scanning the area, as if searching for something. He glanced toward the long table at the front of the Great Hall and met Snape's cold, empty gaze. Snape nodded slightly, but his face didn't smile, becoming even more indifferent. However, the slight flicker in his eyes suggested he was suppressing something. By then, the sorting of the freshmen was complete. Professor McGonagall put away the sorting hat and returned to the professor's table. Dumbledore stood up, beaming at the students. He paused for a moment when he saw his savior, Harry, was not at the Gryffindor table, but he quickly recovered. Welcome. A new school year has begun. Before dinner begins, I have something to announce. He pointed to Lockhart, who was sitting next to him, and said with a smile, Gilderoy Lockhart will be our defense against the dark arts professor this new year. I'm sure you've all read his books. He has considerable experience with dark creatures and other forms of evil magic. I'm sure he'll surprise us in the coming year. Lockhart smiled and stood up, revealing 8 gleaming white teeth. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but the continuous applause silenced his words. Lockhart, feeling the gazes and welcome of the students, was filled with joy. He didn't sit down immediately, but stood there to let the applause linger. Of course, he would also give a speech, so that the school would remember him better. At that moment, he felt a cold, impatient gaze from the side, sending a chill down his spine. He sat back down with a fake smile and glanced to the side, but Professor Snape was talking to Professor Flitwick, as if everything that had just happened had been an illusion. Very good, thank you all. Then, dinner will begin. Dumbledore clapped his hands, and the previously empty plates on the table were instantly filled with food, and he sat down. He looked at the Gryffindor table, thought for a moment, then looked at Professor McGonagall next to him. After all, she was the head of Gryffindor House. Snape did the same, and their eyes met. Professor McGonagall nodded, stood up, and walked towards the Gryffindor table. Where is Harry Potter? Did he come to school? Professor McGonagall came to the Gryffindor table, looking at Joan and Hermione. Only then did she notice that someone seemed to be missing. Ron Weasley isn't here either. What happened to them? Professor McGonagall frowned, looking at Fred and George next to them. They disappeared at the station, Professor, when they passed through the partition wall, George said. Yes, they passed through the partition wall, but they didn't go to 9 3/4 station, and they didn't come back, Fred added. Professor McGonagall's frown deepened. The station had been operating for so many years, and it had never experienced a problem like this. And the fact that it happened right as Harry Potter was passing through was undeniably unsettling. Suddenly, a car horn blared outside, a sound like the agony of a dying bird. The students looked up, bewildered, and the professors gazed out the windows. Could it be? Fred suddenly spoke, his tone filled with astonishment, his eyes sparkling. George looked at him, his eyes sparkling as if infected. That's so cool, he exclaimed in amazement. What's going on? Professor McGonagall asked, frowning. She had a bad feeling. Oh, Professor McGonagall, you might not know this, but my father has a car. It's one of those modified cars. Fred held out his hands and imitated the flapping of wings. Professor McGonagall's heart skipped a beat, remembering the evening prophet she had seen just before arriving. Oh, my God. She turned her head and looked at the long table above. Snape nodded at her, then stood up and walked outside. His expression remained impassive, but his steps were relaxed, even with a hint of joy. Harry and Ron's arrival time was slightly adjusted. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.